Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1465 of Toronto Mic'd. Proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. The Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team. The best baseball in the city outside the Dome, with Rod Black's mustache returning for the home opener at Christie Pitts on May 12th. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. The Advantaged Investor Podcast from Raymond James Canada. Valuable perspective for Canadian investors who want to remain knowledgeable, informed, and focused on long-term success. Season 6 of Yes, We Are Open, a Moneris podcast hosted by FOTM Al Gregor, and Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, returning to Toronto Mic'd is Gregor, Chisholm, and Keegan Matheson. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks for having us.
When and where did you guys first meet each other?
Man, a coffee shop across from the Rogers Sportsnet studios, I guess.
Yeah, who picked that coffee shop?
Probably me. I was interning at Sportsnet briefly in late 2016.
Okay.
And during this 3-month internship, I think a month into it, I got the MLB internship. So those last 2 months of the Sportsnet internship, they probably didn't get their, $0 worth. So doesn't break my heart too much.
Right.
But yeah, I remember Gregor was the Blue Jays reporter at MLB.com then, and I was interviewing for the internship that year. And I believe a coffee shop across the street.
Yeah, there was an internship that we had kind of every year that they don't do anymore at MLB, but there was a lot of good people came through that program. Arden Zwelling was the first intern I had. Jamie Ross, he's the sports editor of the Globe and Mail. He did a couple years with us. Ali Khan, who's now social media manager with the Jays, he was part of that program too. It was a really good program.
So Keegan, were you at Baseball Toronto, your venture back then?
That wasn't then yet.
Okay.
I did
Pre-Baseball Toronto.
Pre that.
Wow.
I did the 1-year internship. Then Baseball Toronto was in between. When I came back to MLB.com when Gregor moved to the Star. So it's been interconnected like that. But that was before those glory days with an asterisk, whatever you want to call them. But before I was making those millions at Baseball Toronto.
And you're both. Oh, I got music for this. Hold on, guys. I'm very, very unprofessional.
There we go.
But we do have a song for this.
Oh, the year was 1778. How I wish I was in Sherbrooke.
I feel like I should be drinking, even though it is.
Do you want to drink?
10:04 a.m.
Like, I have fresh Great Lakes beer in the fridge upstairs. I would totally get you guys started on a story, and I could run up. I'm serious. You could have a lager, an ale, or an IPA. What would you like?
I'll hold off for now. I'll go against my brand, but I'll definitely be introducing myself to these tonight. I'm looking at
you're bringing that home with you. So thank you, Great Lakes Brewery. Actually, I did get a note about this. Let me get to the notes, and we'll set everything up here. It is Philip Parkinson who wrote in when he heard you two were going to be on together and said, you're going to need a lot of GLB. So I had Great Lakes beer all ready for you, and then I realized we're recording at 10 a.m. and I wasn't sure if it was going to be like coffee time. Gregor, do you drink beer?
I do. I should have thought about this more. I would have planned a little bit. I would have not drove Keegan here today. I would have forced him to drive or something.
And okay, so I'm playing this song because you're both Maritimers. So Gregor, remind me, whereabouts did you grow up?
St. John, New Brunswick, the bustling metropolis of St. John, New Brunswick.
Maestro Fresh West lives there now.
He does. It's every time I go home, there's a lot of talk about him because he's like the local celebrity there now. He was hosting that show on CBC down there too. I think he does a radio show there in St. John.
It doesn't get much bigger than Maestro, Maestro. Like that's a big deal.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's from Scarborough to St. John there. And, of course, is it Halifax? Where are you from, Keegan?
I grew up in New Glasgow, which is about an hour and a half from Halifax, and then lived in Halifax until I moved here. I went to university in Halifax, lived there for a couple of years. It's the best city in Canada. Secret's kind of out on it, so it's expensive now. I think a bunch of city folks moved east and ruined it. But
Did Scott MacArthur move out there?
He did. He's not part of the problem. We love Scott, but he
He's
did.
got great hair.
He does, and I'm so jealous. It does make me happy because I feel like we're balancing one another now. You know, like somebody needed to go back and get the good side of this conversion. But yeah, he's a true Nova Scotian now, which brings me so much joy.
Yeah, I mean, him and Griff have a podcast I listen to, and they're both FOTMs like you two. But when you guys met here in Toronto, it sounds like that coffee shop, like how quickly do you bond over your maritimeness? Like, is there some kind of like a secret handshake, and it's like you're going to have each other's back because you're from, how did Tobias Vaughn put it? He said, it's down home day in the basement.
Hey, I was really just hoping it would get me a job, frankly.
Yeah, it got his foot in the door. That's for sure. It didn't hurt. With that
work
MLB
against
internship too, we had like Jamie was a Maritimer. We've had a few kind of Maritimers come through the Jays beat over the years, so it's kind of interesting that way. There's definitely a little bit of a brotherhood, at least. Even though I like to make fun of Keegan for being more. He's more of the country Maritimer. I like to think of myself as like the city boy.
Yeah,
Maritimer.
Gregor's a very soft Maritimer.
Yeah,
Well, I was going to say, I was watching Gregor, like, for his reaction to this song, and he doesn't have that same response you have, Keegan. Like, when I play the song, it's kind of like a dog whistle for Maritimers. Like, you play it, and then all of a sudden, everybody in the bar who's from the Maritimes finishes the line or whatever.
There are a lot of us, though. I'm trying to think of who all. Like, Arash is from Truro.
Yeah.
Arash Madani. Kenny Reed is from my county, from Sportsnet.
Right. All FOTMs.
Dan Robertson, formerly voice of the Canadians, now voice of the Winnipeg Jets, I believe, on the radio. He is from my county, like just our small area. Yeah.
Rob Longley's got a bit of a maritime connection
I didn't know
there
that.
as well.
Okay.
He does. He's a
mom
half
lives out there?
Maritimer. We round up. He's an honorary.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, it's. I think I always say that we just never shut up, and some of us make use of it. I guess eventually.
But where does this love for the Blue Jays? I mean, is baseball huge in the Maritimes? Like, how popular is baseball?
I mean, baseball's pretty popular in the Maritimes. I mean, when I grew up, certainly Boston Red Sox were a big there's a big fan base there. That kind of goes back a long time, even before like the Jays were around. Like a lot of my people who are my parents' age and stuff grew up rooting for the Red Sox. But there's definitely a huge contingent of baseball fans out there. And I mean, New Brunswick is in particular was a baseball hotbed for a little while. You got Real Cormier, Matt Stairs. Like we actually produced more baseball players there for a while than hockey players. So there's certainly an interest there. So it was I don't know, Keegs. I would say that
it's big. Yeah. It's big. There's lots of like men's leagues too, like where people play at a level that's not just kind of slob ball, like slow pitch. Like people play semi-competitively later. I remember when I was coming up, because what am I now? 33. I came up and Sidney Crosby's a couple of years older than me, and I feel like when he turned into what he turned into, that's when like summer league hockey officially took over everything, and that's when you kind of officially all the way lost your best athletes in the summer. So, and I know it was already heading that way, and this is everywhere, but I think I noticed it when I was coming up that you played baseball till 12 or 14, but then the really good kids were hockey. Which is fine. Hockey's not my number one jam, but baseball's definitely, like, especially in the more rural areas, and I think a lot of men's league, especially up through Cape Breton, they would always send a team to the Little League World Series a lot of years.
Yeah.
Every time I went across the causeway to Cape Breton, we would just get our ass kicked. It was terrible. But
well, you had me at Matt Stairs. I feel like you can just start it and end it there. And just checking in on the live stream, because we're live at live.torontomike.com, Ian is noticing that Gregor, even sitting down in the the TMDS studio here, you're almost hitting the ceiling, right? Like, there's not a lot of clearance. That's so you're 6'6", right?
Yeah, 6'6".
Okay, because when Leo Roudens was down here a couple of times, and he's probably the tallest guest I've ever had on this program, he sort of he lies down almost, like he's so reclined, he's like melting into the chair, but you're sitting upright, and there's not a lot of clearance between your top of your head and the ceiling.
This is one of the only times I'm ever standing upright. Usually I've got the big lean too. It's because I'm trying to make sure I actually because you're talking to the microphone,
and you're trying to. We can move that back, like we can.
Oh no, I'm
okay. But I was gonna say you're probably. You're here with Keegan Matheson. Like, that puts everybody on their A game. They want to impress Keegan, right? Like, you don't want to let Keegan down and deliver a subpar performance.
The nation are watching.
What was your reaction, you two, when I invited you on together? Because I would normally sort of set up the season, probably with you, Keegan. We've done it a few years in a row where you come in like just before opening day or just after opening day, and we set things up. Sometimes directly like on your way home from Florida. But this time I wanted to like mix it up. I'm like, no, I want to, because I know you two are so involved professionally and kind of interconnected that way and good friends. I'm like, no, I want Gregor and Keegan in the basement. So when I sent out the invitation, was it like an automatic yes, or did like Keegan, did you have to talk Gregor into it? Like, what was the response?
I mean, I had to think about it for a couple of minutes because I knew that last week we had a big semifinal matchup in our fantasy basketball hoop, so I didn't know if we were actually going to be on speaking terms this week. So it was a little trepidation. Well, he did beat me, so
I lower myself to, and I'm now in the finals against. Is he a friend of the show, Ryan Wolstad from the Toronto Sun?
He's not only he's a great FOTM, and every time I have, and I got to tell Ryan this if he's listening, classified. Yep. From the Maritimes, scheduled to be in the basement in like only a couple of weeks. He's going to be sitting.
We've got a classified connection right here.
My partner here, cousin, is married to classified. So if he's part of the Heidi Martin, the Martin clan in Prince Edward Island. So there is a.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I knew you the connection. I'm like, oh, he went to high school with him, or that's a wild connection.
Yeah, no, we've had a few. There's been a couple of classified concerts that they brought the whole family out for in PEI. There was a New Year's Eve a couple years ago at the Delta in downtown Charlottetown. That was our big night out. So you have all these young kids running around, and then you have all of Heidi's family who'd be kind of off to the side in this little area, and everybody would be like 45 and up.
I'm a big classified fan, like from Boycott in the Industry way back. Love classified, and I just checked my calendar, so it's April 23rd that morning. Classified in person making his Toronto Mike debut. I bring it up not just because you're Maritimers, because Ryan Wolstad is, and I don't know if Classified's his jam. He's more of like a Wu-Tang guy, but
he is.
90s hip hop, like 90s hip hop is Ryan's jam. Like he came over, kicked out his favorite 90s hip hop, and definitely an FOT.
He's an encyclopedia. So it's me and him in the finals, but I handled Gregor quite easily in the semis. Not only because of the talent on my roster, but just because of the culture I've built, I think, as an organization. It comes right down through the coaching staff, the training staff, even the security staff. It comes down to knowing names and treating people like they're part of the family.
That answer right there is why I was thinking about not coming. To subject myself to that.
Yeah, Gregor's probably spent enough time around me over the years.
I've heard this spiel before.
But, we at least... it's not as sick of me as he probably once was, but we did just have to cover that opening series in Tampa together, which meant some long days at the ballpark and some long evenings at local family restaurants.
Wow. Okay.
Between.
So we're gonna, we'll spice it up with different, stories you guys have about each other and your relationship. But as we sort of talk about the 2024 Blue Jays, but I want to let people know. Gregor has been here before. It is not his Toronto Mike debut. He was here in September 2019. That was episode 512. Mike chats with Toronto Star Blue Jays columnist Gregor Chisholm about his career in sports media, the Blue Jays, Donaires, and Stone Temple Pilots.
Interesting.
You're a big STP fan?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, for sure. I'm an STP fan.
I was a big... multiple times I went to see STP open for another band. I wanted to see them, even though they weren't the headliner.
Oh, interesting. I saw them on the very kind of last tour before things really fell apart.
Shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. Yeah, we lost Scott Weiland there, but the band continues, right? They're still going with a different lead singer.
They are. They also had the lead singer for Linkin Park for a little while, who tragically passed away as well.
Chester Bennington.
And I think they're still going even after that.
Lots of shouts out to Ridley Funeral Home here, but
Gregor jams are a big problem on our beat.
Tell me the difference between your jams. Like Gregor, what are your jams?
Oh, my jams are like 90s alternative grunge for sure. That's like Ben. Alice in Chains, Stone Temple
also
Pilots.
Continue with a new lead singer.
They do.
I saw them open for Velvet Revolver, which the lead singer was Scott Weiland.
Yeah, there you go. It's all interconnected.
Okay, so Greg, I'm going to look you in the eyes because you're going to pledge something to me. I want this very badly. At some point, maybe late summer or something, will you come back and kick out the jams with me?
Yeah, of course.
That'd be a great
90s
episode.
alt rock. Yeah. I'm so excited.
I feel like I've witnessed that episode a few times already, because if you are at a bar with Gregor and there is a jukebox, at some point he's just going to disappear, and you're going to see his 6'12" frame lurched over a jukebox in the distance. And then normally usually it's going to start with Rooster is going to come on first.
Love Roosters so much.
And it's it's like the same 10, 15 song playlist is about to just creak out of that jukebox.
Angry Chair. Oh my God! Listen, we're going to do this for that jam kicking episode, Gregor. But you and I think there's going to be a lot of like in the Venn diagram. I think our jams are gonna have a lot of overlap. I can't wait for that. Keegan, you've kicked out the jams, but I'll just point out your debut was in February 2018, so you got in there before Gregor. That was episode 306. Mike chats with Keegan Matheson about his new venture, Baseball Toronto.
Hey.
Some guy named Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and some guy named Bo Bichette, who I don't even know if they had played yet in 20.
Two of those three things worked out.
Well, we'll see. Maybe without Baseball Toronto, there's no MLB.com gig for you. But then we also did kick out the jams that day. So we already, people can go back then and hear your jams. Remind me of the story. I got to play a song. Bruce Dobigan was here yesterday, and he wanted to play a song about Maritimers going to Alberta for work, and they would do 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And then he found out you guys were coming on. He wanted me to play it for you and ask you what you think. But before I do that, remind me professionally how you guys intersected. Like, is it so Gregor was leaving MLB.com for a Toronto Star gig, and maybe that maybe recommended you?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it started a little bit before. It started with the internship at MLB when we met at that coffee shop, and we decided to bring him on as the associate reporter for that year. And then, I mean, Keegan was in a similar boat to me when I was an associate reporter with MLB back in like 05, 06, where you're just kind of trying to find your pathway to kind of stick around for a little bit until like certain things open up. And so there was a bit of a domino effect there. I mean, Richard Griffin leaving the Toronto Star to go work for the Blue Jays and PR, it was the first domino that fell, and then I went and started talking to the Star, and eventually made the decision to go there into a bit of a different role, and then that opened the door for Keegan. And I mean, it kind of similar to how I even got started, really. I mean, I needed a domino effect back in the day. Jordan Bastian was the Blue Jays reporter for MLB.com. He ended up wanting to move to the States. He took a job in Cleveland. That opened up the job for me. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff is being right time, right place. I mean, both of us kind of grinded to get here too. I'm not denying that, but there's a certain amount of luck involved, and Keegan, timing wise, it kind of just everything kind of worked out perfectly that year for both me and him, I think.
Yeah.
So, Gregor, when are you going to make the jump to the Toronto Blue Jays and be their new media guy? Is that in the cards?
I don't think that's in the cards. I don't think that they are exactly beating down my door to try and bring me in as PR either. I don't know if that
they could be under new management at some point.
Could be beating down your door for different reasons.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it was a lot of timing, which I'd like to say it's about being good, but that's 5% of it sometimes. Good timing, and I remember the part I didn't say out loud as much when I was doing Baseball Toronto was that it was my way to stay as the number one prospect if you could.
I always thought even if you didn't make a dime on that project, like it basically you're getting, I guess you get a media pass and you get to cover the team, like you're there.
A way to stay afloat, and then
Brilliant.
It was always waiting for like Gregor said, kind of that domino effect. And God, has there been one since? I'm still kind of the young-ish guy on the beat, which is sad and stale, and I wish was not the case, but it's been a while. You don't get many of those domino effects anymore, and I don't know if we will again, but it came at the right time. I remember at that time I was cards maxed out, broke as hell, getting really close to having to give up on this.
Well, that's a movie, I think. I think we got to make the movie, the Keegan Matheson story.
There we go.
Who would play you?
It was a pretty depressing scene, though. I don't know. It would be like a dark comedy, I think.
The Baseball
as you
Toronto
watched it
years
unfold,
yeah. Gregor had a front row seat to the less glamorous era of all of that. And, I think I kept the outside looking a little more polished, but under the water, whoo, it would be a very dark comedy.
Well, you fooled me, but now it's the time to just
that's the trick.
Deliver the real talk. So no bullshit on this program right here. I can tell you what, I can help feed you now. I know MLB.com actually does pay you, but I am going to send you both home, each of you home with a large meat lasagna.
Hey.
Greg, are you a vegetarian?
No, I am not.
Not even close, right?
No, not even close.
You don't even want to touch a vegetable.
The meat is probably like 85% of my diet.
Somebody tipped me off about that. Somebody just said, "Oh man, you should see his what he eats. Like he eats like a high school kid or whatever."
That's probably Bob Elliott. Bob Elliott loves to talk about how I eat.
It might have been Bob Elliott. Bob Elliott, I always tell the story, but when Bob Elliott, the first time he visited, he's at the door of double fisting Diet Cokes.
Yep,
Okay,
that-
one
oh,
in each
yeah.
fist, right? And I'm thinking,
Yep.
what a nice guy. He brought me a drink. Like, you know. So I'm thinking, well, that's nice. You know, he's down here. All right, cool. We're talking. It's great stories, as you can imagine. And he's drinking a Diet Coke. And I'm like, oh, he's not giving it to me yet. And he finishes the Diet Coke and he pops open the second one and takes it down. I'm like, oh, it wasn't for me at all. Like, they're both
Yeah.
for him.
The man crushes Diet Cokes.
Yeah.
That can't be good. I mean, I don't know. There's no, probably, I'm speaking out my ass here, but is there any science behind, can that be good for you? I've probably not recommended, but
Can't
maybe
be
there's no
good,
evidence.
You know, definitely can't be good. I mean, it's better
There are
than
worse vices out there, though,
better
probably.
than crushing IPAs all day.
Well, we talked about Lane
but,
Staley earlier. There are definitely worse vices out there than Diet Coke. Okay, so I'm going to play this jam because Bruce Dobigan told me
All
to.
right.
But you got the lasagna from the lasagna's from Palma Pasta,
From Palma.
fresh craft beer from Great Lakes Brewery.
We love Great Lakes.
You each have. By the way, you guys are getting a lot of swag today
yeah.
for April. There's a measuring tape. There it is over there from Ridley Funeral Home. Pillars of this community since 1921. Okay, this is exciting because it's only the second time I got to do this in 2024. But you each have a wireless speaker, high quality Bluetooth wireless speaker. That's a gift from Moneris.
Moneris,
The
we love
card
it.
kind of explains more about it. And that code there, QR code, allows you to easily subscribe to Yes, We Are Open because season 6 is dropping and they went to Calgary. Al Gregor, the award-winning podcaster, went to Calgary. And he's talking to small businesses about, you know, their trials and tribulations and overcoming obstacles and how they succeed. And those great stories are told in this wonderful free podcast. Yes, We Are Open, season 6. You guys got to subscribe. You got
Love
the
it.
QR code. No
Listen
excuse.
on my Boxan. I like the name of this.
Boxan.
Boxan. You don't have to stop the music tonight. It says in the back. I'm a fan of good branding. I like this.
Shout out to Gordon Sumner and AKA Sting. I want to get the name of this cafe that's River Cafe. So the Sal Howell and her staff at River Cafe on Princess Island in downtown Calgary. So that is not in Prince Edward Island. That is Princess Island in downtown Calgary. It's an amazing story of resilience. So check that out. And while you're subscribing to podcasts, the Advantaged Investor podcast from Raymond James Canada. Now, Keegan, that you're making the big bucks and you're not
Hey,
living out of your car.
millions.
You can get best practices and good advice from the experts on the Advantaged Investor podcast from Raymond James Canada. Later, I'll revisit these big hardcover books because I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into another professional baseball team in the city that you may have heard of. But here's a song, just a little bit, because I promised Bruce Dobigan. Do you guys know Bruce Dobigan?
I feel like I know the name. Do I?
I've never met him, but I do know.
He used to write for the Globe, and he was at CBC for many years, and then he went out west. But just a taste of this, because this band is called the East Pointers.
Monday morning, minus 18. Another West trip, Babaji to Calgary. I always knew she'd get used to me leaving someday. Bloodless words now, her tears have run dry. I can tell by the way she doesn't hold me as tight. And she's thinking maybe she's better off alone. Nobody warned me, nobody told me I'd leave there so broken, come back so lonely. I'm killing my soul for the life that I'm leaving behind. 2 weeks on it, 2 weeks off, my blood is wearing thin. And
So it's a great song. It's all about Maritimers who would take the WestJet to, I guess, Fort McMurray and other places where there's jobs in Alberta, and they would do 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And I'm curious, like, you guys got buddies you went to high school with who do that? They go to Alberta, make money, come home to the Maritimes. Any experiences like that in your friend circle?
Everybody, yeah.
It was such a common thing. I mean, when I was growing up, a lot of there was some parents, there were some dads who were like friends of high school kids. Their dads of high school kids that I went to school with who did that. And then especially kind of when I went off to university, there was a good chunk of my buddies would do that. It was always I don't know. I never knew what to think of it. That's a tough life, man. Like they be picking up for 2 weeks, heading out there, come back, get about a week off, go back out, and just kind of do that vicious cycle. But they made some cash while doing it. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's got to be tough
Serious
though. On the
cash.
tough on the relationships, tough to do that. But this is a commonplace. This is a song about it. And I was just thinking, okay, so we lost Joe Flaherty. The news came out yesterday, and that got me to the SCTV parody of Going Down the Road, the Donald Shabib book about Maritimers coming to Toronto for jobs.
Yeah.
Basically, what a great freaking movie. But the parody, Joe Flaherty plays like a doctor who's going to Toronto. There's doctoring jobs in Toronto, and the song that they play, of course, is Stompin' Tom Connor's There's a Rainbow in Toronto where the Maritimers are bold. They always get a pot full, but they never get a pot of gold. And you guys have the pot of gold. Like, you two are shining examples of Maritimers who came to Toronto for the jobs, and you got them.
Couple
There's not many jobs. Think about it. There's not many jobs in mainstream media to cover the Toronto Blue Jays, Canada's only Major League Baseball team, and you two have a couple of those very rare jobs. You did it, man.
Yeah, there's less by the year, it seems like.
Yeah.
There's I don't know how I should properly say it. Yeah, there's fewer by the year, I guess. Fewer actual reporters covering the team.
It doesn't come with the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah.
But we're rich in life
But
experiences.
do you both?
so-
If you live in Toronto,
Yes.
Yes,
that's a pot of gold right there, buddy.
it is.
It costs a pot of gold to live
Just
in
a
Toronto.
complete sellout. I live on the King and Bathurst area. Just as I've sold out as much as a man possibly can.
Yeah, speaking
to
of
Toronto.
rural Maritimer, that is just not the scene. That's
No.
just a very bizarre scene for the guy who loves the country and loves fishing and
Have
loves going out in
completely
the
sold
boats
out.
to be like right in the middle of the entertainment district with the umps going around.
Spending
It's
his
just
days
terrible.
in Trinity Bellwoods Park.
I should have stayed back. I should have done the 2 weeks on and off. Just came home with a nice $1,100 a month truck payment and a bad habit, like so many.
You
of
can
my
treat the
buddies.
Blue Jays beat like that. You could come in for 2 weeks and then take a week off, and then
That'd be
go somewhere.
lovely.
You fly back to
I kind of go on the road like that.
Yeah, you
it's
kinda do.
probably a bit easier.
How do you decide if
than
you're going on the
working
road?
oil
I mean, why
rigs.
aren't you in Houston right now?
Because I'm in New York tomorrow. So to start the year, I did Tampa and then home for
You
a
did
bit.
Tampa because you were already in Florida.
Yeah, I'd been in Florida for about 50 days, which
Plus, it's opening day. You
I
wouldn't miss
deemed
that.
to be enough. Yeah. And then Houston was a good time to get a break. I don't know how many of our reporters are in Houston, but no thank you. And then I'll go to New York because that one matters much more. So I'll do about 2/3 of the road games about this year, 120,
Amazing.
130. So that's enough. I don't want more. Certainly, I've learned over the years what enough is for me, but like the travel, don't need more. Happy I have some. And
you got a job in mainstream media covering the Toronto Blue Jays. I didn't want to bury that lead, that you guys should just pat yourselves on the back,
Hey.
that this is really special, I think. Like, how I could probably fit everybody with a job from mainstream media to cover the Toronto Blue Jays baseball team could all fit in this basement easily, like with room to spare.
yes, yeah,
We could probably name them all
yeah.
right now.
If everyone was here, I'd be less happy, but I'm glad it's just us three. Yeah.
Big question for you, Gregor, from the Toronto Star, still Canada's biggest newspaper. Congrats on that. Thank you, Richard Griffin, for taking that job at the.
Yeah, thank you, Griff. Really, thank you.
Thanks to Griff. Now doing a podcast with the aforementioned new Maritimer, Scott MacArthur. So check that out. But do you ever get to go to road games?
Oh yeah, no, I was in Tampa with Keegan for the end of spring training and the opening series, and I probably do about a road trip a month. Is I think what the plan is for this. For me, it was that was actually a big selling point to going to the Star. I knew I wouldn't be the only one who was traveling, and I did about a decade at MLB, and I was getting ready to start a family. And as Keegan knows, it's an awful lot of nights on the road. I think I added it up when I was down there in Florida just the other day, and I think I've spent over a year and a half of my life in Florida. Which sounds great, and it is. There are benefits to that, but it does become challenging after a while. I mean, Keegan's definitely living that life right now, where you're kind of home for a week, on the road for a week, and there's a lot of upheaval that comes with that. But we're doing probably. I'll be doing probably about one a month.
Amazing. And who else at the Toronto Star is covering baseball right now?
We got Mike Wilner. We've got Mark Colley, who's one of our younger reporters who came on last year. And then we've got Rosie DiMano doing baseball as well.
Spot duty there. Okay. So here's a question. How many Toronto based, beat reporters go on the road with the Blue Jays? Like, how many would there be? I know back in the day, you'll talk to these guys, like you mentioned, Bob Elliott, and I'll have Dave Perkins down here and Larry Milson and stuff, and they'll be telling me about, I don't know, yeah, they'll be telling me about how many people would be there. For a game in Philadelphia in the '93 World Series, like the Star would send like 40 people or something ridiculous like that. But how many approximately on an average game in, I don't know what game against, let's pick on the Houston Astros. Like if there's a game in Houston, how many people based in Canada would be there to cover the Jays?
I mean, in Houston right now, there's just 2 writers. So you would always have one essentially there from Sportsnet. I think there's someone there from The Athletic right now. But it certainly is a skeleton crew, even compared to when I started. I mean, I've certainly heard the glory stories about like the 90s and things like that. But when I started in 2007, the Blue Jays beat was one of the biggest beats in all of Major League Baseball. It was something that really surprised visiting writers from a lot of other teams or when we'd roll in, because we really had a big traveling crew. I mean, there was essentially a time where we had I guess 4 papers that would in Toronto who would always be sending someone on every road trip, and then there would be times when they would send multiple people. So it wasn't quite like the 90s when there'd be like 4 people there, but like, I mean, we would have a traveling crew between 12 to 15, and now I think it's down to probably, I mean, Tampa was kind of the upside of what our market now kind of does, and I think we had 5 or 6 there.
Yeah, and that's the peak
opening.
Yeah,
and that's opening day, and that also, you're in the same state where spring training took place.
Like I pretty much say that there's 2.5 writers on every trip.
Yeah,
and so
pretty
one
much
from
always
the Athletic. One is you, and then
I would. The
much
second
more
one
rarely
is
there, but it's normally me and Sportsnet.
And Sportsnet,
and then
do they even
usually
count? Like,
someone else.
Don't we put like an asterisk beside Sportsnet in that not only are they have the coverage, the exclusive coverage, but they all they all work for the same Rogers conglomerate there. It's
and on top of a Sportsnet writer, we'll also have Hazel will be there, Dan and Buck will be there. So there's at least some people in my job. Thank God, some people to fill out a scrum and not leave me stranded. But normally it's me, one of Shai or Ben from Sportsnet. Right. And then sometimes a third. Like, for example, in New York, beginning tomorrow, I think it's just me and Shai as writers, I'm pretty sure.
Kind of wild when you think about it. Yeah. So this is like the third series of the season.
It's nice when you get a third or a fourth.
In New York, and you got a couple.
Sometimes, but strange.
Well, at least you're there.
Hey, if I'm there, I'm happy. And, me and Shai in New York, I'll be good. Me and Shai will get along just fine.
So I've never met Shai. He's been invited on Toronto.
We need to get him on here then.
Well, I've tried. Ben's been over. He was great. But Shai, I've yet to have the pleasure. But tell Shai to get over here. Like let's get him in. Get him in here. I would appreciate that. I want to compliment you real quick here, Keegan, because of course Gregor, I know he's always going to be as thin as a rail. Like that guy. I don't know what that metabolism is like. But I gotta say,
dude eats like a disaster.
He just looks trim, right? Tall and thin. Some might say lanky, but good for you, Gregor. But you, Keegan. You've shed some beef. You look fantastic.
Yeah, I dropped a little bit this off season. I'm always been bigger, obviously, but I kind of let it go off the rails late last year, I believe. Speaking of travel, it's easy to just trip over your feet and have 12 beers and a pizza. And not that I don't still do that, but a little more controlled. So I didn't have much fun this off season. Got it back under control a little bit and dropped a few pounds in the off season. So we'll try to keep it there. I was getting worried because when we walk out of Rogers Center, it's the same gate as the players, which I almost just said, but I'll not say because there's enough crowds there already. But people were stopping.
I'll fix it in post.
Confusing me for players. Like when I would walk out, nobody would even double check like their book of cards. So I was like, oh God, I'm getting too fat to even be like the fattest player on the team now. So I've had to pull it together just a little bit. Went for
you reined it in.
Yeah, reined it in. Not all the way, but
well, you look good.
Enough.
Here. I'm just telling you. Take the compliment. You're looking good here. Looking fantastic. And you haven't, not in this year, which is 2024, as we're recording. People will be listening to this in the far-off future. Maybe you're listening to this in 2025 or beyond, in which case you may have released a book. Are you able to tease what's coming in 2025, Keegan?
Yeah, it still feels so far away.
And at some point, I got to just tell the listenership, we will talk a little 2024 Blue Jays. I realize we could talk for 90 minutes and never get to that, but please tell us about this book that's coming.
Yeah, that'll be about probably around this time next year, so I'll come back and we can have a little launch party for that. But it'll be called The Franchise, Toronto Blue Jays. So I got to finally share it with people pretty recently. The quick version is that it's going to be a curated history of the Blue Jays. So not a boring tell everything history, but thankfully some freedom to tell stories that I care about, skip over some stories that you've already heard 10,000 times and that I've written 10,000 times, but try to get to the personalities, the people involved, what mattered to them, why it mattered to them, and hopefully tell you some fun stories with that. So it'll be out in about a year.
I love it.
It is already testing my patience because I'm a pretty, immediate person
You're
with
a man
my
of
work
action.
normally. So it's this is a much different process for me, but it's been fun so far. Soon enough, I'll get to the point where it drives me crazy, but so far so good.
Okay, The Franchise, Toronto Blue Jays, a collection of stories and essays releasing in hardcover from Triumph Books. It's funny it's from Triumph Books, only because FOTM Rick Emmett, do you guys know who Rick Emmett is?
Another where I've heard the name, don't know him.
Because you guys are very young, but guitarist for Triumph.
Okay.
So he's a world-renowned guitarist. We're Toronto's second greatest trio, I'd say, after Rush. Triumph, a bit before my time too, to be honest. But Rick Emmett's a great guy. Rick Emmett's confirmed to be celebrated before the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball game on May 12 at Christie Pitts. And since, Keegan, you're putting out this hardcover book about the Toronto Blue Jays next year, I want to give you and Gregor a hardcover book on the history of the Toronto. So take a look at that book. That is the history of the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team. I always say in the intro, the best baseball in the city outside the Dome. You guys are covering what's happening.
Sometimes.
It depends. I was trying to start the rumor Joey Votto would be a Toronto Maple Leaf before the Blue Jays.
He still might at some point.
You never know.
You never know. He seems to love playing in the city. And you got, what's your next option after if the Blue Jays don't want you to play there? You might as well play at Christie Pitts for the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team. So enjoy that book.
Thank you.
I'm sure you're going to be at the Dome on May 12th. Boo. But there is going to be an amazing home opener for the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team. That is going to take place May 12 at 2 p.m. And some great people are going to show up. Not just people like Rick Vive and Rick Emmett. All the Ricks are going to show up. Rick Flair. No, I don't know about Rick Flair. I don't want to start. Don't quote me on that one. But Hebsey's going to be there. He's going to be calling an inning with Peter Gross.
Nice.
Okay, Peter Gross and Mark Hebscher calling an inning. Stephen Brunt's making the trek from Hamilton. Steve Pakin's going to be there. All the Steves and all the Ricks. So if you know a Steve or a Rick, get them to Christie Pitts. But at some point, if the schedules align and there's no Jays game to cover, but there is a Sunday afternoon Toronto Maple Leafs baseball game at Christie Pitts, I would love you two to be my guests there.
Definitely. Didn't Great Lakes, is there Great Lakes available in there now, I believe?
You know what?
I think it's
no,
left field.
It is left
Left
field.
Wow,
Okay, so
I'm misbranding completely.
it's a bone of contention with me because I think in the negotiations, I think Great Lakes finished second.
Okay, I remembered hearing something about a new beer sponsor, and I
Left
crossed
field.
it up.
And shout out to left field.
But I do love my Great Lakes. I ran into our friend Troy down in spring training, actually.
Oh, yeah, he went on a
Troy
family
was down there.
vacation.
Troy and his
So
boy were down.
Troy's here tomorrow
Love it.
because we record Between Two Fermenters, which is the official Great Lakes Brewery podcast. At some point, you should be a guest on Between Two Fermenters.
There we go. We'll see how many beer I can drink in one podcast.
What is your go-to Great Lakes beer?
I used to be the Octopus Wants to Fight because I used to love crushing IPAs, which caught up with me. The Karma Citra I'm into, and I do like the Canuck Pale Ale. Like now that I've kind of come back to beer, because I went away from beer
Troy's
for a while.
Canuck Pale Ale.
Yeah, now that I've come back to beer a little bit, I have discovered the joy of the light crushable beer, which I did not appreciate as much as a younger
it's
man.
now, I think it's coming off the press now. Is that what you call it? The press? But when you can new beers? Okay. So the Sunnyside IPA comes out only for the summer. I think it's coming down the line right now.
Ooh.
That's the IPA to crush in the summertime. I think it's 3.2 or something, and you can down a couple and still feel.
That was my problem when I moved from out east. Alexander Keith's is an IPA, which I thought that's what all IPAs tasted like. And I got to Toronto, and I would get to a bar and say, give me your IPA. And they would hand me motor oil. They would hand me a bone shaker or something. And it would ruin my life for days. So a session IPA is up my alley.
100%. Okay. So when I do have some, I'll make sure to save some for you. But we'll get you on Between Two Fermenters. Now, so many places I want to go. Let me start with you, Gregor. Actually, let me read a couple of questions so I don't forget these at the end, and then we'll kind of walk through the 2024 Blue Jays. But Craig M. writes in, Mike, can you ask the guys how bad would it have to get for Schneider and Atkins to lose their jobs? And is Don Mattingly the obvious successor for Schneider? I've defended Atkins in the past, but not a fan of a lot of the moves he's made in the last 18 months. So to set the table, you two just have the conversation. I'll sit back and listen. You guys are the experts. You're there. Underwhelming offseason for a lot of Blue Jays fans, and what do you think has to happen for the Craig M's fantasy to come true? Talk to me about this. Either or.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we've talked about a lot behind the scenes on the beat. It's just a natural point of conversation because of where the Jays are at kind of in their history right now. And I mean, I think things would have to go really off the rails for anything to happen in season. I would be pretty shocked one way or the other if the GM or manager were let go during the actual year.
Right.
But look, this is a make or break, in my opinion, this is a make or break season for this entire era of Blue Jays baseball. So if the Jays do not take a step forward this year, and in my opinion, taking a step forward is, you actually have to make some noise in the postseason. I mean, this is a team
win
that's
a game,
been there.
maybe.
Yeah, start with winning a game and then actually advance around or two for this to actually have some meaning to it. So, I mean, look, Guerrero, Bichette, Romano, these guys are all nearing the end of their contracts. They've got less than 2 years left now. And so if this team doesn't have something to show for it at the end of the year, and you're looking at those guys only having 1 year left on their contracts, you cannot put the franchise in a position where you're letting these guys walk away for nothing because it's going to set you back too much. Now, if you have a team that is, contending for a World Series, those are some risks that you're willing to take. You don't mind taking guys into expiring deals when you actually are playing for something significant. So really, I think that's what's on the line. I think if the Jays don't end up playing for something significant at the end of the year, I think it's going to be time for a regime change.
Yeah, you can drop a bomb on this team pretty quick if you want. Yeah. Like if this team doesn't go well this year, there is an off-ramp that you can just crank the wheel on real quick.
Help me understand this again. I'm not as close to it as you guys are. That's why you're here. You're the experts. But we're sort of running it back with the same team as last year. I mean, even maybe remind the casual fans, like, what is different on this team from last year?
Not much. I mean, Kevin Kiermaier turned into Kevin Kiermaier. Whit Merrifield turned into, I guess, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa.
Right.
Not a ton else. Justin Turner in, but
no. I mean, look, this front office spent most of last year talking about how they were waiting for things to normalize and waiting for the offense to turn around because that was the expectation. These guys supposedly had track records that they were going to fall back on. It never happened. And not only are they still maintaining that stance, they're kind of doubling down on it with what they did in the offseason because, I mean, they really made some moves that were essentially just bringing it back. And it's last year is not the type of season that you would have thought would have been a run it back type year. It's one of the things I was very surprised at this past offseason. I think a lot of Blue Jays fans were as well, and certainly disappointed about it.
It's bold because it also operated under the entire assumption. And I felt like I was going crazy all offseason, not like just beyond my typical mental breakdown during an offseason, because the entire run it back thing existed on an assumption that the rotation and the bullpen was just going to be the exact same, which is bananas. It's not going to happen. And that's not a knock on the pitchers involved. It's just a recognition of reality. Like you're not going to have everything. Is that because of how healthy
they were?
So healthy. And everyone in the bullpen had a very good year. Like even maybe Jimmy Garcia's wasn't the best, but it wasn't bad. Yeah. One of these bullpen guys is going to have a 5.5 ERA this year or miss most of the year. One of these starters is going to miss. You're already seeing it with Alek Manoah. You saw it with Gausman for a bit in spring training. Like it's not all going to go as well. There's kind of regression in the other direction as well. So there's a lot of hope involved, and I don't love hope as a strategy. Maybe is the best way.
Everything needs to break a certain way. It sounds like for this team too. Now, one of the interesting things. So last night there was a 2 outs in the 9th, right? A 2-run homer, and then we kind of snatch a victory from the claws of defeat. If we lose that game, and it was very, down to the last out, right? This team is 2-4 to start the season, and you're off to New York, and then you're coming for your first homestand of the season. But I'm wondering, like I remember when they got rid of Jimmy Williams. I got to go back. I got to go back to 1989 for all my references. But Jimmy Williams, I think they were 12-24, and then they brought in Cito Gaston in 1989. So the Don Mattingly question that was brought up there by Craig M. Like, so you mentioned management unlikely to change during the season, but like a Schneider on that kind of a leash? Like if this team gets off to like a 12-24 start, is Don Mattingly the new manager?
I think it's less about Schneider and more about Atkins. And in my mind, Atkins doesn't get at this point another manager hire. I mean, he replaced John Gibbons with Charlie Montoyo, and then before he replaced Montoyo with Schneider. And so I don't think you can look at this team and blame the problems on the guy who's running the show in the dugout. I mean, certainly there were some questionable moves in the playoffs last year, but this team has also taken a top to bottom approach where, it's not just Schneider who is saying this stuff. I mean, the front office has some say in what the lineups look like and how they come up with their pregame planning. So I don't think Schneider goes for that reason. I think if it got to the point where Schneider would need to be fired, then I think it would mean that Ross Atkins would need to be fired too. And then you kind of come at it from the perspective of that new guy is then going to bring in his manager. I don't think, Mattingly is the easy guy to point to as being the next manager of this team because he's done it before, because he's already there. Rarely do those guys actually end up taking over the main job. But my expectation is that Don Mattingly will be a manager again somewhere. I just think it will be somewhere other than Toronto, because I think if this thing goes south, I think you're probably also, you might not be looking at a traditional rebuild, but you were certainly looking at a major retooling of the roster. And then I think you probably go with a guy who has a little bit less experience, who's going to work with some of the younger guys. I mean, it's not a Charlie Montoyo, but you might be bringing in another Charlie Montoyo type, while Mattingly would probably go to a bigger market, which is kind of, his name has been mentioned now for a few years as kind of a possibility.
And I think when you look at Ross and Schneids, like I agree with Gregor, you don't get to hire a fourth manager.
Schneids, is that is that how you're referring to?
Yeah, but when I'm asking
remain
him,
objective as a journalist.
When I'm that's other people's problem,
that's
not mine.
I think. That's
but,
the Gibby.
Yeah, that's I call him John in questions if I'm being broadcast. It sounds more formal, but with Ross, you don't get to hire a fourth manager if you haven't won a playoff game.
Right.
I mean, my God,
you can only blame those guys so many times.
Yeah, you can only throw so many people under the bus, and with Schneider, I mean, he's still a guy that I believe in him as a manager. And I shouldn't say still. It's still quite early in this. But I'm also a believer that there needs to be room for a manager to develop a little bit, too. Okay, he got his ass kicked. Totally. But he's someone who I trust and at least want to see bounce back from that. Like, how are you going to do it differently? How will you evolve as a manager? Because I think we look at managers and coaches, this goes for anything, NBA, NFL, you kind of are who you are, nothing changes, easy. But I think Schneids can develop and be a better manager. But if you're the GM of this team, they have played 6 playoff games the last 4 years, lost all of them. You've hired, this is your third manager. I think the more I get into this, I view front offices, like right down to the manager, as a company as much as I view it as a baseball team. And there's managers answering to managers above them. Everybody has a shield, but at a certain point, you don't get to hire a fourth manager in Major League Baseball if you're not winning any playoff games. It just doesn't work like that.
Very interesting. Now you've reminded me of the. I felt like Atkins was throwing Schneider under the bus with the Barrios pull in was it the 4th inning? Remind me, this 4th inning of the playoff game last year. He was dealing. Okay. And now that I finally got you guys here in the basement, what was your thoughts on all that? Like Atkins kind of suggested that he didn't make that call. We were kind of assuming this was a prearranged, preordained thing that no human. It's like the automation bots were in progress, and you cannot, stop this process flow from happening. But
I think we were sitting next to each other in the press box in Minneapolis.
We were,
and I think the first 10 things I said to Gregor were, "What the fuck is happening right now?" Just over and over, because yes, I understand why things happen. I can see the reasoning that's being used. It's not unfathomable, but I think it's with things like this. I think it's important to stick to the opinion you had at the moment, not say, "Oh, this is smart," and then change your mind 10 minutes later when it blows up. I don't think anything we were saying was positive in the moment. And then I remember soon after when Vladdy got picked off at first base, I think I nearly took Gregor out of his chair with a swing of my hand. I was looking down typing and saw that happening. And it was stunning as it happened. And I know it devolved into an off season of transparency, communication, blah, 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 with big words. But at the time, I mean, I have a lot of respect for how Jose Barrios has handled that since. because he could have been pissed. He should have been pissed. I think he was pissed. He's the ultimate pro, and he was having like the ultimate FU best playoff start of his career against his old team. He looked amazing.
Right.
And he gets yanked. For Yusei, I can still picture Yusei Kikuchi jogging in from the bullpen wondering what is going on.
And here we are many months later, and nobody's really ever taken accountability for that move.
Well,
I mean, that was the issue I had with the way Ross Atkins came out at the end of that season. Was, I mean, at no point in time at the end of last year did I think that Ross Atkins' job was in jeopardy until he went in front of the microphone and did his year-end press conference. And about 5 minutes into that press conference, I was sitting there listening to his answers, and I thought to myself, this is going so badly right now that he has just put himself on the hot seat. And Shapiro came out a few days later and gave him a vote of confidence, saved his job, but the optics around that were terrible. I mean, everybody, it wasn't just you, thought that Atkins was throwing his manager under the bus. Nobody believed what he was saying. Nobody believed that the front office didn't have any kind of role at all in the way that the Jays were handling their pregame meetings, their in-game strategy. I mean, it's all intertwined. And so we've known that for years. And while Schneider, sure, was the guy who went out there and took the ball, the organization from the top all the way down to the bottom needs to take some accountability. And to me, that was just a complete vacancy of leadership in that moment, one that the organization still hasn't really fully recovered from. And so I will say that, to Keegs' point, the guy who handled this really, really well was Jose Barrios, because he's a guy who could have held a grudge. He could have said a lot of things at the end of last year. He could have said a lot of things going into this spring that would have really driven a wedge between him and the coaching staff, the front office. He didn't take that. He took it like a man, and he's trying to bounce back this year. So kudos to him. But the way that entire situation was handled from top to bottom was a complete mess. And I mean, we've seen this before. They kind of did a similar thing a few years ago against Tampa Bay. It wasn't as big of a deal, but you took out Matt Shoemaker, brought in Robbie Ray. That game went sideways. A couple years later, they did essentially the exact same thing, just with even better players and even more shocking decision. But it doesn't seem like they've necessarily learned their lesson. They're a little bit stubborn in their ways.
It's the beauty of collaboration. Like if I write a terrible story and only my name is on top of it, well, I'm screwed.
The buck stops there.
If me and Gregor co-byline a story and it sucks, I can say, well, some of it was Gregor, some of it was me, some of it was...
Who hosted the Oscars this year again?
Jimmy Kimmel? Yeah.
Okay. No, I meant to go. You're right. I said Oscars, didn't I? I mean now Golden Globe Awards. Okay, Joe Coy.
Joe Coy, yeah, that was much worse.
And early on, he's like, oh, someone else wrote the joke. The jokes you're laughing at are the ones I wrote. It's the writers. It's sort of like that. Like I always feel like when Atkins says, essentially Atkins in that press conference, that disastrous press conference, he announces that it wasn't his call. Like this wasn't a preordained thing that from him. To me, I feel Schneider's the guy being the mensch here, because he just come out and say, like, I did not make the call, like that was not my call. Like we all kind of operate under the assumption that there's no way the manager made that call to pull Barrios for Kikuchi in the fourth inning, right? So where are we? We just sort of like we move on because nobody's going to own up to this thing, and just it's just a clusterfuck from an organization. That
I don't think anyone's going to go any further on it. Like in terms of the organization, like I'm sure people have said a lot behind the scenes and are pissed. Yeah, like, especially if you are getting put out there and aired out a little bit when you know what happened. But it's like Gregor said, it's not the first time. It's kind of how the organization's operated, and it's like it surprised me, but didn't surprise me.
And the way I kind of look at it too, there's kind of an erosion of trust over time within the market. And I mean, let's be honest. I mean, when Atkins and Shapiro arrived here, they didn't get a very warm reception to begin with because of the way they came in, and Alex Anthopoulos and all the things that happened with that. But I mean, they have had now a long time here, and as the seat gets to be a little bit hot, you kind of look at some things that have happened over the last year or so, and I think people just aren't trusting them and are liking them even less because of the things that happen, and the playoffs are part of that. I think the way that the organization handled the public relations in and around things with Anthony Bass last year was another erosion of trust within a huge section of the fan base, because the things that were being said publicly were not matching up with the things that were going on behind the scenes. And there was clearly an overprotection of the player that was going on there. There was a large section of the fan base that was offended by that. And it's not... It became about Anthony Bass and the organization, but to me, it was more about how the organization handled it. Because you're gonna have guys like this in Major League Baseball who are gonna say controversial things. They're gonna do something stupid. It's how you respond to that, because you know those guys exist, but what are you representing? What are you standing up for as an organization? Mark Shapiro didn't say anything publicly at all during that time, which was a very big surprise to me. And Ross Atkins just stepped in it every time he did. So he talked to the media a few times during that stretch, and every time he did, it seemed to get worse. And the way that the public was reacting to that was they were seeing the quotes, and almost everybody was saying, oh, we don't believe this. We don't believe what he's saying because it didn't match up. And when you have that over time, those things build up. People get more and more frustrated, and ultimately your leash starts becoming shorter because the people who are your boss notice that your approval rating is going even lower and lower and lower and lower, and at some point in time when the results don't match what you're expecting, a move has to be made.
Now I'm on the live stream. I see Lethbridge Wayne. Hello to Lethbridge Wayne. Love it when you show up. He was always at the we would record a Hebsy on Sports every week, and I got to co-host that for 5 years, and I always knew it was time to start going when Lethbridge Wayne showed up. So hello to Lethbridge Wayne. But I want to dispel something, because I think I have a theory on what's going on with this, and I'm wondering if you guys can kind of confirm my suspicions, and maybe we can take some of the heat off the Blue Jays for something that happened at the end of last season. Okay, so Lethbridge Wayne writes, they lost the last game of the regular season, but still clinched a wild card. They celebrated with champagne like they won the World Series. I was totally embarrassed by it. So this is Lethbridge Wayne just wrote that. Now, at the time, I remember thinking like, oh, that does feel cringy to be celebrating because you backed into a wild card spot. But my assumption was at the time, as a guy who just proudly gave you Great Lakes beer because I'm in partnership with Great Lakes beer, my assumption at the time was that MLB had some endorsement deal with Budweiser that when every team clinched their playoff spot, there would be Budweiser product available for the cameras to roll and show the players celebrating with Budweiser product. Like, this is my assumption as a independent man of commerce here at TMDS. Do you guys have any insight into this? Is this?
I think there is.
Yeah, so I was under the understanding that there was, although I do know that there was one team last year, and I can't remember who it is now, who did not do the celebration.
You can opt out? So that's what I'm wondering. Like, could the Blue Jays opt out of, like, because you lose, you were expected to make playoffs, and you lose on the last day. Now you've got your wild card, and I do remember watching the footage of them celebrating, and I'm sure you were there. It is cringy. Lethbridge, he was embarrassed by it, Lethbridge Wayne. But if they can opt out, that does change things, because I felt like maybe this was some obligation to...
there was one team, I think, that did like a toast.
They did a toast. They did a toast.
Grab a beer, grab a champagne.
How do you two think, as guys who covered this team, how do you feel about a team that celebrates in that manner, having lost on the last game of the season to back into a wild card spot? I'm just curious.
I know it's a huge bone of contention for fans, because, I've certainly got a lot of messages about it, and going back to 2015, I can remember, there was lots of people who were upset about the Jays celebrating when they should have been supposedly continuing to push for, the top spot in the American League, so they would have home field advantage throughout the playoffs. So, this happens every single year. I will say that, to me, I don't think it's a big deal, if I'm being honest. I think it is something that happens across the sport. I think it's something that every market that makes the playoffs, their fan base complains about it pretty much, unless you are celebrating in early September because you've clinched so far in advance and people don't really care. But this is a topic of conversation that pretty much every year. The thing that maybe is not as apparent to people who are watching from home, that celebration does not last long. That celebration really is like 15 to 20 minutes. It is, there are exceptions to that. I can think of the celebration when the Jays clinched in 2015 in Baltimore, and that was early in the day and part of a doubleheader, and they got very into it that day. But the celebration this past year was short, and everybody kind of moved on, and it is mostly for show. And I think it's mostly for show for sponsors. It's a brief moment to let loose. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
It's for cameras. God knows when I say Sportsnet wants it, I don't mean that as a shot. My company, MLB.com, wants it for videos, for stuff. There is some sort of Budweiser.
And money is changed. I'm certain money changes.
Oh, there's money.
Hands.
There's a reason that it's
placement.
Budweiser and Bud Light being poured on each other, and you can see those bottles held over the heads.
Right.
I don't have a problem with it. I get why people do, and I don't disagree with that
Also,
entirely.
hindsight being 2020, we go on to get swept in the wild card series, and those circumstances
it happens
losing
quickly.
that game. Like, so it's like, and then it all becomes one big blob of embarrassment.
And it's also different for every player, you know. Like I'm sure George Springer, who's made the playoffs 100 times, is in there thinking, okay, have a beer, let's go. I'm sure if you did that with Justin Turner, he'd be in the corner just like chugging a Budweiser and saying, I do this every year. But in every clubhouse that, like, I'm trying to think last year, there's like a Cam Eden or some stuff like that, where it's a guy who's never been there. This might be the one shot he's got to do it. It's probably pretty special for them. But like Gregor said, like, we're in the room for those, usually getting pretty wet with the ideally champagne. Beer is what makes you stink. Ideally, someone just gets champagne on me. But they're
Do you wear the
pretty quick.
goggles?
No, I go to the Richard Griffin school of not wearing protection into those. That was always a big Griff
Gregor,
thing.
do you wear the goggles in there?
I definitely do not wear the
not
goggles.
goggles.
I will wear like a bit of a windbreaker with a bit of a hoodie or something. I'll throw that on. So like when I see it coming, I'll try to do a little bit. Because there's, I think it was in Baltimore actually after they clinched. I was trying to get into a cab after the game to go back to my hotel, and it took a few cabs before they would let me in because I got in and I reeked of alcohol, and people they were just like, I'm not picking this guy up.
Yeah, the beer is the problem. Last year I got really bad champagne. I forget which player it was. Doused me. That's when you get sticky. I remember walking home and I feel like I had honey all over myself. But when you get the beer on you, that's a problem. You just stink.
You know, again, I'm a little older than you guys, so all my early memories of Blue Jay playoff action. Literally, 2 teams in the American League would make the playoffs. Okay, so 2 would make
a little different. Everyone, like, if you're trying, you make the playoffs now. You know, so that's also a bit different.
Again, what is the number? Is it 6 teams? How many teams in each How many teams in the American League make the playoffs this year? 6.
Yeah, 7 now with 3 wild cards.
7?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're very, very, very close to NHL numbers, right? Because the Leafs are going to clinch tonight, probably, maybe. Okay, so the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to maybe clinch tonight, and I can tell you, if there was a drop of fucking champagne in that dressing room, it would be like there'd be a national.
There'd be
scandal.
the 10 worst columns I've ever read would be written. It would be.
And what about Steve Simmons in the Toronto Sun there? Okay, so just to compare different sports, different cultures and stuff, but no one's celebrating anything tonight when they become one of 8 teams that will now vie for success. Now I don't remember now because the Leafs almost never do this. I know the fans celebrate, but I do not believe after you win a round of a playoff that there's that drop of alcohol is celebrations will occur, at least not with cameras rolling. So it's one of those huge differences that you don't celebrate in NHL until you've got Lord Stanley's mug that you can hoist there. And you can ask Sidney Crosby and Nate McKinnon about that, you Maritimers. Because we only know it from black and white footage here. Apparently that's what happens. But in the MLB, if you're one of the 7 teams that makes it, there will be live coverage of the champagne and the beer. And it's just a different sport, different culture.
To me, that's the one that I find a little bit more annoying and a little bit more over the top.
NHL?
The MLB with how you do it after every single round. So it's it's a little bit bizarre to me that you would, the regular season I actually get. I mean, it's the longest regular season of any professional sport. You're playing every single day. These guys have 1 day off a month. There's not a lot of time to, so I can get behind celebrating once you actually clinch getting into the postseason. But it's a little bit weird to celebrate and then 4 days later celebrate again after you win a wild card game, and then potentially celebrate a week after that because you've won a best of 5 series. It's just that part's a little strange.
Well, remember, Gregor, that Budweiser money, man, that's cake right there. That's what pays Keegan Matheson's salary.
Goes right to me.
Did you guys play? I'm sure you guys did, but did you play the games where you didn't have enough people and you'd put a ghost runner on third?
Yeah, of course.
I know. I guess it's not just a generational thing, but the ghost runner on third, ghost runner on second, that was everything when I was growing up. And this guy's handle on Twitter is ghost runner on third, and I just get nice nostalgic vibes from this. But he heard you were coming on Toronto Mike, and he wrote, Alejandro Kirk looks better starting the year, in my opinion. Do you think the birth of his child last year, delaying his spring training start, threw him off? He's hit well at every level. Do you expect him to have a better year? And before you answer, let's just use this as an opportunity to assess how the Blue Jays are at the catcher position, not to be confused with back catcher, which is how I grew up referring to this position. And Mike Wilner has told me I was wrong.
You're the first person who's that's ever happened to. I guess I'll leave it to the guy who has a kid. I mean, having a kid, sounds a little difficult. But like B, it delayed his spring training. Right, and
that's the significant.
Once you're playing catch up, you're screwed.
Yeah, to me, I mean, I actually think about it less from the role of a parent here, because I think, you know, I'm gonna be a little judgmental and say that the Major League Baseball players don't have to deal with the exact same home life that like
Slightly
I do. I think there's a little bit. Yeah, there's probably a little more. Yeah, I think there's a little bit more of a situation. Even though Alejandro Kirk has not become a rich man yet, I'm sure the man can afford.
That's a relative term.
Yeah, I'm not gonna have very much sympathy for his home duties right now, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's doing a whole lot. That would just be my guess. The way I look at it more is the amount of time missed in spring training, and I mean last year was just a strange situation because he was supposed to be there on the first day, and then they were like, oh, he's going to be here in a couple days, and then that story stayed like that for a very long period of time, and obviously the birth of his child was a big factor there. But I mean, he missed basically half of camp, and so while the Jays said he was working out and stuff back in Mexico while it was happening, and there's only so much you can do, and I think Kirk in particular is a guy that, one, you want to have some eyes on him because you want to get him under your conditioning, your training program. So you missed out on that. And then the additional responsibilities that come with a catcher. I mean, catchers have more on their plate in spring training by far than anybody else on the staff. And so he was already kind of preoccupied with that.
Right.
Can he bounce back this year? I mean, that's a
he has
very
to,
good
right?
question.
Like he's your primary catcher while Danny Jansen is recovering from that fractured bone in his right wrist.
He does have to, but I mean, we saw it again last night. There are some ill-timed double play balls. I mean, there's just gonna he has not quite lived up to what we thought he was going to be at this point in time. But I'm certainly not down on Alejandro Kirk going into spring training. I thought he might be in a position to bounce back, and I like the Jays pitching situation as a whole between him and Danny Jansen. And I think the bigger question comes at the end of this year after Danny Jansen becomes a free agent. I mean, that's probably a guy who might price himself out of this market because of what they're trying to do elsewhere in the roster. And when you're down to having Kirk as kind of your main guy, that's where I start getting a little bit nervous, because I think having Danny Jansen, even though he's out right now, I think having Danny Jansen is what really kind of makes that whole package work.
Yeah, I don't know about having Kirk as the guy. Yeah. That's dangerous. You know, and if Jansen could go a month without breaking a bone, great. But I think Danny Jansen's so valuable.
Yeah.
Like, to this pitching staff, to this lineup, who he is as a person, the history he has with the organization. Like, I think if he's a guy you can keep around for 5 more years, he's someone you're talking about as one of the very best Blue Jays catchers ever, if he can stay healthy and if he can hit. But Kirk, I think, works so well as like a really high-end 1B. And I know that that's some tough pigeonholing, but is he going to catch 125 games a year? I don't think so. And just the realities of how a player holds up physically. What's Kirk like physically at age 30, 31, 32, holding up to a full catcher's workload? And with his skill set, I loved him as a prospect, but if you are going to be one of the slowest players in the entire sport, your contact rate has to be absolutely elite. And you have to keep the ball off the ground, because if Alejandro Kirk hits the ball on the ground, he's out no matter what. So it's got to be in the air. He's got to be making a ton of contact. Like him as a catcher, like how he receives, how he blocks is all very good. But it just makes so much more sense when it's Jansen and Kirk, because if Jansen signs elsewhere this offseason, which I think would be a major underrated loss for this team, and one that I don't think they should let happen, but then you'd need to sign another legit catcher with Kirk. Like, you couldn't just get another backup type. You'd need a legitimate second catcher.
Well, I heard there's this pretty good guy in Arizona named Marino. I don't know if you've followed this guy.
Hey.
He'd look good in a Blue Jay.
It's too early to judge the trade, though, which is something people only say when they're losing the trade.
It's early. It's early. Okay, so really quick hit here. Below average, average, or above average at the catcher position for the Toronto Blue Jays in 2024 as you see it?
Above.
Above is for me as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, who would win a race, Alejandro Kirk or Daniel Vogelbach? Who wins a race?
You know, it's funny. We were actually just looking at some of the StatCast data in Tampa. Were you there for that conversation, Keegs? Yeah, so we
I must have been in the dining room.
We were looking at the sprint speed because there was a play that Alejandro Kirk did not beat out, and I think I said he was the only one that would get thrown out in that play, and somebody tried to correct me, Shai tried to correct me and say that Vogelbach would as well. Vogelbach is, I believe, 0.01 feet per second or something slower than whatever the metric is.
Right.
It is almost identical.
They haven't invented a device yet that can measure his,
they're both first, bottom.
But I feel like Vogelbach at least has the big guy who gets some momentum rolling down the tracks.
Does he though?
Well,
Does he?
Eventually. I feel like the momentum would eventually take over.
To the heavier set people.
Whereas, I might need to put myself in this race, which would be real interesting.
I would put all my money on you winning this race.
Yeah, I might have the longer legs, which would help me, particularly compared to Kirky. I would take Vogelbach. It would be really close in a race to first. I think if you make them run the full lap, it's Vogelbach comfortably. He'd get the momentum rolling.
Oh, yeah, a little more conditioning there, you think?
Yeah.
A little more endurance.
The freight train gets going.
As a guy who currently lives in Etobicoke and is a proud Torontonian here, and we could probably throw a stone from here and hit Mimico. Vogelbach, he's only here till Votto's ready, right? Like he's just taken Votto's spot on the roster, right?
I would assume so. I think the only chance of that not being the case is, one, if anything goes wrong with Votto.
Oh, sure.
Then
all
that's
bets are off. Shout out to Otani.
And then the other one was if Vogelbach came out and actually kind of lit the world on fire a little bit. It'd be hard to try to do much.
Keegan's got a better chance of lighting the world on fire.
Yeah, that's very true.
All right, so this is my effective way of segueing us to first base. Okay, we talked about him the first time you were here in 2018 or whatever. Some guy, Vladdy Guerrero Jr., he's still there.
He's still kicking around. He's a different cat now.
Is he still? Because I won't name names, but at least one beloved FOTM told me before he played his first game for the Toronto Blue Jays that he was guaranteed to be in the Hall of Fame with his dad. I thought that was quite a high lofty.
Guaranteed is pretty high.
Before he faced the pitch
even for someone who was if I could do this job for 30 more years, which what went wrong, but if that happens, I don't know if I'll ever see anything like Vladdy in the minor leagues ever. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's bold, but he was
certainly
amazing in 2021 and he's been good since. And good is
so. How's he looking for 2024? What should we expect from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at this point? And by the way, he seems perpetually 21 years old.
Yeah, and every spring is the story of, he's in great shape, he's back. Mike Trout, Mookie Betts, these guys don't get back because they don't leave. This can't be a story and I know I'm the one writing it.
But you're not playing for the Toronto Blue Jays.
There we go.
You might play for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
And I know it's a story every single year, and I have to write it because I have to write a million stories, and are they all going to be great? No. But every single spring is the same story with Vladdy, that he's back, he's in good shape, he's committed this year. Stay there. It's much easier if you just stay there.
It's Grandma's cooking, that's what I heard.
Yeah, and listen, I'm a Vlad built man. I know that things fluctuate. I get it. But it's a story every year, and it shouldn't be. It's if that goes away, I think things get better. What's he going to be this year? Is he going to be an 850 OPS guy? Is he going to hit 35 maybe? You see those flashes of the 45 home run guy, but the last 300 plus games of his career just paint like a really good hitter, which is great, but he was supposed to be the best hitter in baseball. Yeah,
Gregor, what do you think of Vladdy Guerrero Jr., who's going to be, I guess you're looking for, I actually read this at MLB.com, that Keegan Matheson is hoping 125 starts at first base, and then...
okay, that's less controversial. I was worried.
And then maybe a DH start per week. That would be like a sweet spot for him. But what do you think, Gregor, about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and our prospects at first base this season?
I view it very similarly to Keegan. The one thing I do push back a little bit on is the fact that, I feel like the narrative has almost gone too far in the other direction now. The people really love beating up on Vladdy. And I think Vladdy, while he has arrived with insane expectations and has not come anywhere close to living up to those, he hasn't been as bad as a lot of people make him out to be. And a lot of people, I hate to try and take a Jays angle here, but a lot of people do forget of how young he still is. And if you look at the careers of guys like Jose Bautista, Edwin Encarnacion, they hadn't even gotten going by this point. And so the only thing I do caution people is to not just automatically assume that the Vladimir Guerrero of today is going to be the Vladimir Guerrero 5 years from now. I would not be shocked at all if he eventually figures things out at the big league level. It might not be in Toronto because he's only right now got 2 years left on that, and it might happen 3, 4, 5 years down the road. But it's kind of what makes his upcoming free agent case so interesting to me, because That's one where I do not envy the Blue Jays front office, because I don't know how you evaluate him as a player right now.
Yeah.
It's fine to do it in a 1 year, one-off kind of arbitration, negotiation, hearing, all that type of stuff. But when you're starting to project out 10, 12 years down the line, I don't know how you do that. And the number is certainly a lot lower than right now. The number would be a lot lower than what I would have thought a couple of years ago. But it can also still get right back to where it was going to be if he comes back this year or has an insane year next year and somehow rediscovers that 2021 magic. Then you're talking about a huge payday again, and that's the one where I'd be a little bit nervous about. But it's a very, very complicated case that I don't know if anyone in baseball really knows how to handle.
No, I don't know who Vladdy is.
Yeah, I don't know.
I've covered him as much as any player. Like, I've focused on Vladdy more than any player in this organization for like 7 years now. I don't know who he is. I know who Bo Bichette is. Like, if you're looking for a comp, like extension candidates, you have a much narrower window to say who Bo Bichette is. If Vladdy is an 805 OPS, like 30 home run guy, okay, well, great. Like, that's like, again, it's not a complete failure. It's just relative to expectations, like Gregor said.
Right.
But like, what if he does 950 OPS, 40 home runs this year? Like, are you back talking about a crazy number? Because, like, kind of what Gregor's getting at, it's I can see those negotiations of Vladdy's camp pointing at one thing and the Jays pointing at a completely different thing. There's such a million-mile wide gap right now. Like, I don't know who Vladdy is. We know who he is this year, maybe so far. Is it going to be someone else different next spring? Is it going to get better, get worse as the year goes on? He's pretty unpredictable, which is fine because he's young. But I also agree with Gregor. He's probably going to have that 50 home run MVP season eventually. It just might happen with like the Philadelphia Phillies in 2029.
Well, it won't be
going to come
Yankees,
someday,
so.
but. Yeah, apparently, unless the Yankees offer him the most money, and then
He could do that like Hulk Hogan heel turn or
got
whatever.
real interesting there. Yeah.
Okay, so it's safe to say above average at first base for the Toronto Blue Jays.
Oh,
in
for sure.
2024. Yeah, I know. It's good. I have to ask the questions here, okay, Gregor? I can't make these assumptions. But let's talk about second base here, and then I'll try not to spend so much time in each position because you guys might be here several hours if I do that. But second base, talk to me about the Blue Jays at second base in 2024 as you see it at this point. Six games into the season.
Yep, second base I'm actually a little bit more okay with. If we get to third, that's where I'll have a bit of a rant.
I can't wait.
Second base, second base is fine with the platoon of Kevin Biggio, Davis Schneider. I would like to see the Jays kind of look for a little bit more opportunity to get Schneider in the lineup a little bit more, particularly because of their options elsewhere. But that's not necessarily related to second base because, a lot of people are down on this guy, Kevin Biggio, and they've been down on him for a while. There's something about the skill set that I will always like. I know it's not for everybody, but he's an extremely patient guy. I love the way he works at bats. I like high OBP guys who can do a little bit of power. He just needs to become more consistent, and I actually think he might have a pretty decent year this year. So I'm fine with where the Jays are at second base. It's elsewhere around the infield that I have concerns.
Now,
I like Biggio quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I think if you put his brain in everyone's head, you're a pretty good team. Like, he's so smart. Like, I say, and this is like a strange reportery thing, like I say often that like I wish Biggio was a bigger part of the team's success just so we could like talk to him more about like big team-wide stuff. Like, I think he's very smart, could be like a good voice of the team if he was one of the people out in front of it. But Davis Schneider, that game last night's the perfect example of why he needs to play more. You can suck for a whole game and hit one home run, and guess what the story's about? The home run. Not about how much you sucked for not just that game, but 17 innings prior as an offense. Dreadful.
Right.
One home run. It changes the entire narrative. Like, if they had a few more of those last year, I think Schneider embodies that so well, and the need for power, which when the team or staff would push back against that need for power last year, I didn't get it. I didn't buy that one bit. Like, the power makes a lot of problems go away, and Schneider is that.
Do you think amongst the fans, the great unwashed fan base of the Toronto Blue Jays, that part of the problem with Kevin Biggio is he kind of comes up in this nepo baby trio, right? Like, because you got Guerrero,
he was always the
Bichette, and Biggio, and they're like, look at their dads and how great they were, and look, these guys are prospects, and the nepo thing and everything. And then two of those three are like world-beating all-stars, and then you got Biggio, and I feel like that's part of this whole managing expectations, is he was thrown in that group. So I think the fan base is underwhelmed by Kevin Biggio because he's not Bo Bichette or Vlad Guerrero.
If his last name was Johnson, I'm sure it's different,
Right.
And I'm part of that problem. The number of stories I wrote about Vladdy Bo and Kevin Biggio. Right. Always because it was a neat narrative, and it made he was a very good prospect. But if he's got a different last name, I think people are viewing him as the overdone caricature of like a gritty utility man who can do a lot of different things, blah blah blah. But Biggio reclassifies you.
I classified good promotion for a future Toronto Mike Maritimer coming here. Oh, to the Maritimes. So second base, average, above average, or below average?
Average for me.
Yeah, average to the potential of being slightly a bit above average, I think.
Okay, wow. Okay. Shortstop, Bo Bichette.
Who's that? No.
I think Bo's the team.
Yeah.
Honestly. I mean, I know there's older guys, there's more veteran guys. I think Bo's the team.
I'm with you.
And I've kind of come to appreciate that more over the years I've just seen so many guys who work hard and take a lot of ground balls, and it's just a bunch of fluff. But I think Bo makes me appreciate what it actually means to do it and do it right, like kind of the Marcus Semien tutelage of it all. And I think Bo's the team. I think that if they go somewhere good, it'll be because of him. If they fall short, it won't be because of him.
Yeah, and the injury last year in particular, late last season, just showed how valuable he is to this team. And so whether he's the MVP at the end of the year or not, he's kind of the MVP at the start of the season, just in terms of like what he means to the rest of that roster. Because if they had to replace him for a significant period of time, they are in some serious trouble.
Yeah, who would be? Who do you go to there? Ernie Clement?
You would go Ernie Clement, yeah. You go, or I mean, I guess you go Isaiah Kiner-Falefa too. You probably get both of them a little bit at shortstop. But either way, I mean, the production. No disrespect to Ernie Clement, who's had a nice spring and had a nice run last year and filled in for Bichette for a little bit. I mean, they're just obviously not the same player. I mean, Bichette is elite, and the Jays need him at his best in order to contend.
Okay, so above average at shortstop.
Yeah, he's a serious baseball player.
All right, I'm ready for the
Not
Gregor rant. Yeah, oh no, big Bo Bichette fan right here. Let's hear the rant from Gregor. Third base position of the 2024 Toronto Blue Jays.
Well, this is no disrespect to Kiner-Falefa, who's proven himself already to be a very nice individual. Seems like a great dude. Yeah. I think fans will get to enjoy the personality, and there's nothing wrong with the guy, but the player, I mean, that was, to me, one of the worst signings I've seen in a long time. I was stunned by that signing. I mean, to me, he is a utility player that is best coming off the bench. That is the type of player that you were supposed to be able to develop and pay not a lot of money to. Right. Instead, they gave $7.5 million a year to a bench player, and not only that, but then they gave him the starting job at third base. There's a reason why throughout this offseason, I've heard this from multiple places, that just people around the game talking about how the IKF contract might have been one of the best contracts that any player got this offseason in terms like what he actually got paid versus what his perceived value going into the offseason was. So I just found it stunning to me, because not only is it a questionable fit in terms of salary, it was also a questionable fit in terms of personnel, because you already had Ernie Clement, who is, they're not the exact same player, but they are very similar. You could say the same thing about Santiago Espinal, who they had to trade away. I'm not a big Espinal guy by any means, but that's another guy who is a utility infielder. How many utility infielders, how many utility outfielders does one team need? And what was shocking to me about this Jays offseason is that, IKF is known for his glove. And what did this team struggle with throughout last year? Offense. And third base is supposed to be a spot on the diamond where you get a little bit of power, you get some production, you get some pop.
The corners,
Exactly. And you're not getting any of that from Isaiah Kiner-Falefa this year. And that is just not the type of player he is. If he comes in and hits 240 this year with just a handful of extra base hits, that's not on him. That's not a situation of a player coming in, signing a fat contract as a free agent, and then failing to live up to expectations. This is who he is. And the Jays made that decision, just like they made the decision to kind of compile a lot of these type of players. It's how we've had a team, we've watched a team in this city go from 2021, the offensive juggernaut that was that team, and the amount of power that organization had at the time. They've since whittled away at the power, and in their place a lot of times have been these guys who have kind of come in who are, it's just a skill set, a type of player that this organization loves. To me, it was the most redundant signing of the offseason and the most overpriced one.
It's like 2021 was like they got out on the road in a Ferrari and it scared them. It was like, whoa, that was thrilling, but ooh, let's get back in the Camry, And when you go a bit like there's Addison Barger, there's Leo Jimenez, there's Damiano Palmajani, there's Relvis Mark, like all of the top prospects can be infield guys too.
Yep.
And Gregor makes a good point there too, because like I know that IKF is going to get shit on by fans. He shouldn't.
No, he shouldn't.
Get your money. Congrats. Good.
Right.
And like when players move, like Gregor and I, we'll get texts from people we know at the Yankees or the Red Sox. People had good things to say about IKF.
They love him.
And reporters aren't empty with praise when it comes to players. Like people love the guy, like in terms of who he is in the clubhouse and for what he actually does, like his thing. I just didn't get the Blue Jays going for that as the thing. It reminded me like way different players. It reminded me of the Kendrys Morales contract, where they got way out real quick on something that they obviously thought they had kind of pegged as value, and then it was, whoa. Mm-hmm. And when they signed Kiner Falefa, I was certain something else had to happen. Mm-hmm. Like I thought that was a setup move for something else much larger to be happening.
Ohtani, of course.
Oh yeah, what a week. But it's completely surprised me because, like Gregor said, this is third base. This is where you're supposed to be getting some offense. Similar to the corner spots in the outfield. You know, I think Dalton Varsho will be better this year, but when you're trying to get a team's offense back, you're losing offense in like prime spots where you should be able to find it. It's, as a player, like him. As a deal, as a fit, I did not get it, and that really hasn't changed.
But what did you think of Gregor's rant? Pretty good, right?
A 10 out of 10, yeah. A little less profane than what I normally get.
Average, or below average?
Above average. Above average.
And at third base with the Toronto Blue Jays in 2024, you guys both agree below average?
Below.
Hard because I'm tracking all this. A hard below. I don't have a symbol for that. Okay, well below. Okay. My goodness. And any, will Justin Turner get a few spots, a few looks at third base? Okay. Outfield, you started talking about the outfield, but talk to me about, I guess, Springer, Kiermaier, and Varsho.
Well, that's another one where I really hated what the Jays did this offseason. I mean, I the one that really confused me was bringing back Kevin Kiermaier. Again, nothing against the individual. But Dalton Varsho, I mean, the Jays have already made the commitment to the Varsho. There's no going back. They can't reverse that trade now. He is one of your starting outfielders, and you're trying to make the best of that situation.
Right.
But to me, Dalton Varsho's strength would be if he was the starting center fielder in this team. Defensively, he is close to, if not just as good as Kevin Kiermaier is, in my opinion, at this stage of their careers. And if you are going to have a glove-first guy who struggles offensively, it makes much more sense to put him in center field, maximize that defensive value, and then again, use those corners to bring in some guys who are more run producers, bring in guys who have a little bit more power. But to me, essentially, they decided to run it back again with the same outfield, and essentially an outfield that has two of the same guys. I mean, they're different, but they are similar in Varsho and Kiermaier and what they bring to the table and the value that they bring. And so I was stunned by that as I was the Jays signing IKF, and to me neither one of those moves make any sense, and I think it's the reason why we're going to be talking about offense a lot this year, obviously just like we did throughout last year, because those extra couple of bats aren't there. And I think at some point in time, if this team can hang on for the next few months, Atkins is going to have no choice but to address those two spots. He's going to have to go back on what they did because they just don't have enough offense right now, and they're not going to have enough offense.
It's another move where I thought they were going to make another move.
Yeah.
Right.
Like when Kiermaier was brought back, and I think in our first talk with him, he was saying he wasn't sure about the playing time. And I said, okay, maybe this makes sense. All in on defense. And if somebody gets hurt, they have nobody.
Right.
There's no outfield depth. I know Nathan Lucas is there, good player, but if you're looking for a starter and some offense, and it's great
like
to have...
Like a Lourdes Gurriel Jr.?
Yeah, maybe. Didn't he just win Player of the Week? Anyways. But if you're looking to have offense, your corner spots are where it comes. That's where you can hide a guy. Yeah, it's great to have elite left field defense. Yeah, absolutely. But...
Don't tell George Bell that, okay?
Yeah, go back to the Moreno trade. And I know that's something that people love to beat on to the point where it's
you're going to be hearing about it for a decade.
Yeah, it's becoming difficult to even have intelligent conversations about that trade. But imagine telling me at the time, hey, like Varsho's going to come here and he's not even going to play center field. Like, what?
Right.
Yeah.
Then what? That's what the entire value is based on. Is him being an elite center fielder.
I remember having lots of chats with Hebsy about this. He was supposed to play some catcher. Wasn't this the Varsho deal? Was that all bullshit? Like we were told that.
It was always more of a narrative than reality.
Right.
Yeah, that was never really too much. I mean,
I don't believe the hype you're saying.
He was an emergency catcher in the same way that IKF is an emergency catcher. I don't think either one. Like something's gone seriously wrong if they were to get into a game behind the plate. To me, though, it kind of goes back to an overreaction that the Jays had like a couple years ago when they had decided that the talk around this team was that they struggled defensively and that at the plate their hitters were too similar, so they didn't have any balance in the lineup. They were all a bunch of free swingers.
You mean like Teoscar Hernandez?
Exactly. Teoscar Hernandez, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., guys like that. But I think they overreacted to that and then decided that okay, that's a supposed weakness of our team right now. Let's go all in the other direction, and that's what brought the big pivot last year. Where it's okay, we need to bring in Kiermaier, we need to bring in Dalton Varsho, we need to strengthen defense all around, and that worked even less last year. But they had already kind of made that pivot, so now I feel like they kind of doubled down on that failed strategy, which to me is still an overreaction to the way this team played in 2021 and 2022.
And it makes you have to win every game perfectly.
Yeah.
If you're going to play that, try to win
no
3-2,
depth at all.
4-3, you have to be perfect.
No depth at all. And I thought maybe it was that Teoscar and Gurriel Jr. Just had too much fun playing this game of baseball.
Yeah,
I remember that. I was like,
totally.
I think they could use a little bit of fun.
Serious fucking sport, and they're acting like this is some kind of a fun game. That's ridiculous. Okay, average, below average, or above average in the outfield in 2024.
Below.
I'll give it an average. Maybe that's a bit kind, but I'll go
Right.
average.
I lack the way to have two different answers
There we
on
go.
this. So I'm going below here. Okay.
I like it.
DH Justin Turner, who is somewhere between my age and Keegan Matheson's age. Okay.
I like Turner enough. He's looked good so far. They're betting on him continuing this at 39, which is, again, a lot of hope. Maybe I like it a bit more than Brandon Belt last year because he can at least play a third if you need. I think the moment like we saw in Tampa, the moment he comes in at third base, someone's going to bunt at him. Ideally, Genesis Cabrera doesn't end that play by hauling off on somebody, but fine. Like I think he's a very good veteran piece to have. Came with good reviews from everybody. He'll hit you your 20 home runs.
Yeah, better late than never.
And, absolutely. I think Justin Turner is a good piece on a team that's trying to make a postseason run. It's if you weren't going to get like a higher end, more upside piece, I think he makes sense. Not the most exciting, not the most controversial, just kind of that tidy annual veteran DH signing like Belt was.
Yeah,
He's still available, by the way. Brendan.
He is.
Yeah.
I view it very similarly. I think it's just, I think it was a fine move. Not anything that's going to blow people away, but I think he fits a need for what this team needed. I think he's a better fit overall than Brandon Belt. But I would have liked to move a lot more if it came as like a package of like 3-4 guys that were being inserted that lineup instead of him being the only big bat.
So Justin Turner at DH, average, below average, or above average?
Average.
Yeah, slightly above.
Oh, now what do I do? Oh, my goodness gracious. Okay, you guys have to get on the same page here. Okay, starting pitchers, run down the current 5 in the rotation and what we can expect from them. I know Manoah's still...
what's the current order? Barrios, Bassett, Kikuchi,
Gosman. Bowden Francis.
Bowden Francis.
Bowden, sorry.
Who got lit up the other day. I still think Bowden Francis is good. Like, I still really like Bowden Francis. And I think Gosman's a legit ace. I think Barrios is I think Barrios might have his best MLB season this year. I think it's a very good rotation. I think Alek Manoah is a really awkward, clunky, squeaky wheel in all of this. That's probably not done being awkward and uncomfortable, but as a rotation as a whole, I still think it's a legitimate strength. I think they'll need their depth more this year. It can't be as perfect as last year, but I think if everything goes wrong, it's not going to be because of the rotation. I don't think.
What say you, Gregor Chisholm from the Toronto Star?
It's an above average rotation, but I have the same concerns that Keegan does with the health. I mean, especially coming off a year last year where they avoided that almost entirely. If you set aside whatever the situation with Alek Manoah was, to me, I've used this comp before, but last year reminded me a lot of 2016. That Jays team was supposed to go into that year as kind of an offensive juggernaut after the 2015 season. That never happened. The reason they made the playoffs that year was because of the rotation, and the reason the rotation was so good that year was not only the arms that they had in it, but it was the fact that everybody stayed healthy. They only essentially needed 5 starters that entire year until they brought in Francisco Liriano at the deadline, and then they went with 6. But that was the year that Jay Happ had an incredible year. Aaron Sanchez won the ERA title, and so people went into 2017 just expecting more of the same. And what happened? The rotation completely cratered, and Sanchez was never the same after that. Happ still had a good year, but they had issues elsewhere throughout that rotation. And I think it's a mistake for the Jays to just automatically assume that they're going to get the same production that they did last year. I think the improved depth a little bit this year helps protect that against a bit. But I mean, here we are in the first week of the season talking about Bowden Francis, who last year was a nice success story as a guy who kind of really established himself as a swingman. But there's been a lot of long-term concern for him dating back a while now about whether he has enough pitches to make it as a starter, and they kind of had to press him into that role this spring because they don't quite have that depth yet, because Yariel Rodriguez is still getting himself stretched out. Ricky Tiedemann is still a little bit farther away, so there are a lot of question marks after the top 4 in this rotation, and I would take that even a step further. I don't think the Jays can automatically assume that they know what they're going to get out of Yusei Kikuchi this year. You look at Yusei Kikuchi's entire career, it's been a roller coaster. So just because he was great last year, I'm not sold the fact that he has just suddenly figured this out, because we've seen long stretches from him before when he was with Seattle where he was really, really good. The Jays signed him thinking that he was going to step into that role in 2023 and immediately become that guy. He didn't. He did last year, but I don't know. We'll see. I would still say it's an above average rotation.
Agreed.
I just think there's a heck of a lot of risk there.
And what should be our expectation for Alek Manoah in 2024?
I have no idea.
Flip a coin.
And that coin better have 20 sides on it. I don't know. Right now he's building back up, but it's an awkward relationship. It's been a year of shoulder issues that don't appear to be showing up on MRIs. I don't know what's going on there. And I know it's my job to know, but I feel like we've heard a lot from one side and not as much from another side. And I think it's a situation I thought was improving at the start of spring training. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's your job to know, but it's also your job to not know. And
it's also my job not to fill space with bullshit when I don't know, which I think is just as important. Yeah. So that one's been a very strange
I'd rather
situation.
hear you say I have no idea than blow smoke up my ass here. Like Gregor's been doing this whole episode. Just kidding. Just kidding here. Okay, maybe quickly cover the relief pitchers, and then just before I play the lowest of the low to say goodbye, I will ask you about the day before TMLX 14 last December, and we'll revisit that day just really briefly on our way out here. But starting pitchers, above average, average?
Above.
Above. Okay, you agree. Thank you for agreeing. That makes my life easier. Now, relief. How's the bullpen?
Bullpen's good.
Yeah, I like the bullpen. You're also seeing the injury risk. Like, it was a lazy day late in camp, and Schneider says, okay, Romano has an elbow, Swanson has a forearm, and it sounds like they're both coming back okay, but still, that's like, ooh, that's scary. But they have depth. Jimmy Garcia, I like. Chad Green, you go down the list, I like them. Tim Meza, we'll see. Stuff isn't quite there early this year, but I think it's a good bullpen. I think they built a sturdy bullpen. It's another one that might not be as good last year based just on health and averages, but I still think you're happy with the bullpen. Pitching isn't going to be what screws this team, I don't think, this year.
No, and I think the fact that they're starting without 2 of their top guys in the bullpen, and they're kind of just doing. I think they're fine right now.
Yeah.
That shows that it's the one area in the roster where they can afford to have some injuries and still get by. I mean, Chad Green being able to, he's essentially probably number 3 on your depth chart in the bullpen. By the end of the year, he's probably going to be number 2, but he probably entered the year a little bit below, Swanson and Romano, and you have those guys out, and he's able to step in and do the job just fine. And he's a guy who's got a very long proven track record with the Yankees. He's done it before. I like the overall depth, and I think that that's the one spot in the minor leagues where they're going to be able to continue to backfill a little bit. So I don't have really, and even with the injuries, I don't have concerns about the bullpen.
Who is Nate Pearson at this point? I feel like sort of like the Guerrero question. Like who is Nate Pearson? We've been hearing about this guy for about 14 seasons now, I feel.
Yeah.
I have to check the math on that.
I feel like I've been the one writing those stories for 14 seasons.
Is he now a veteran? Is he 35 years old? What's going on?
He's an old young man, something like that, but it's someday he's going to have like a 68 inning, 1.7 ERA season someday.
Yep.
It could come 4 teams from now. It could come this year.
Wow.
But it's still like the talent's still there. It's like Greg was saying about Vladdy, like it's all relative, right? So if he was a scrappy 19th round pick that kind of made it for himself, people would be high on the guy. Since he was the former number 10 prospect in all of baseball, it seems like a disappointment, but
it's all about managing expectations.
talent's there. Like
Right.
it'll happen someday. But right now he feels like kind of like the lottery guy in the bullpen.
I'll just add quickly one part to that. I do think the ship has already sailed on Pearson being able to become the guy that we thought he was going to be able to become, because he can't start now. I mean his starting days are done. At this point in time, I even if he were to switch teams in like the next few months somehow, I don't really see him starting over again as a starter. And once you move from that starter to the reliever role, your overall upside just plummets. And so he will probably at some point in time, have a couple good years as a high leverage reliever. He might eventually become a closer and have some success there. But that is still a huge, huge fall off from where he was supposed to be. I mean, this guy wasn't just supposed to be a good starting pitcher. He was supposed to be a generational type ace. And I remember going down and watching some of his starts in the minor leagues in Buffalo, and I've just never really seen a guy dominate the way he did. I mean, he reminded me of Justin Verlander at the time in the way that his velocity would increase as he got deeper into starts. He had the offerings to really have success as a starter, and the fact that the Jays are now essentially going to have to settle for him at most being kind of a middle inning reliever is a huge disappointment, and I just don't know how he ever gets back to where we thought he might be.
Speaking of huge disappointments, okay, so one of the Robert Hercevic from the Dragon's Den, okay, coming off a private plane. There's a disappointment for you. Okay, so TMLX 14 was last December. It was at Palma's Kitchen in Mississauga. So I'm now going to take this opportunity to tell you both, Gregor and Keegan, that TMLX 15 is June 27 from 6 to 9 p.m. at Great Lakes Brewery. I know you've been there, Keegan.
I like that
South
balcony.
Etobicoke. You got to be there if you can. I don't know the Blue Jays schedule and all that stuff. That might get in the way. But if available, I would love to see you both at TMLX 15, June 27. Palma Pasta will feed us, and Great Lakes will buy you your first
Love
beer.
it.
It's the day before my birthday, so I might just keep the party going.
There we go.
Like that'll be
Roll
the
it
start
into
of it,
it.
and I'll just roll it into
Okay,
the
you want
next
me to
day.
blow your mind right now? That is my birthday.
June 27th?
There we go.
Wow.
So look at us, birthday twins
What a week.
here. One day, it's a milestone birthday too. So and no pressure, but you might
40.
You might, yeah, 40 years ago maybe. Okay, so the reason I brought up TMLX 14 is because Stephen Brunt was there, and we opened that recording at Palma's Kitchen talking about what happened the previous day. It was the previous day that there was a flight from California to YYZ. And I believe it was, you tell me if I get the wrong names, but John Morosi, I believe, tweeted about the fact that Ohtani was on his way to Toronto. I got very excited. Some people that I expected better of, but not quite at the level of John Morosi. But I know like an Adam Seaborn tweeted that the Rogers had scheduled like a 4 p.m. press conference. So all these pieces are coming together. Online, I'm
Yeah,
watching.
the press conference that we didn't get to know about somehow. So, yeah.
Well, this is why I'm glad you guys are here to tell us how it transpired for you. But of course, meanwhile, Kikuchi's got reservations, I think, at a restaurant in downtown Toronto for 50 people. And there is a plane. I mentioned.
This sounds like a fever dream.
Yeah.
This shit doesn't sound real even a few months later.
And I mentioned Robert Hercevic from Dragon's Den, that we didn't know it was his plane, but we did track in real time. We were tracking the flight that we believed Ohtani was on, because he was coming to Toronto for that press conference with Rogers to announce he was going to be a Blue Jay, and then he was going to have that celebratory dinner with Kikuchi and everybody else. Like, this was all happening all because of John Morosi. I'm blaming him. But tell me from your perspective, a Toronto Star journalist and an MLB.com journalist, like, was there any moment during any of that where you had even like, oh, maybe this is happening? I want to know the truth. How did you feel during this speculative nonsense that we all got wrong?
So at no point in time did I think the Jays were going to actually be able to land Ohtani until that tweet from John Morosi.
I'm the same way, by the way.
Once John Morosi said he's on the plane, that is the first time where I said, okay, wow, this is happening. Because the only way he's coming back to Toronto in that scenario, in my mind, is if he's coming to sign the contract and do some sort of announcement type deal because the ballpark was being renovated. He had already done the tour of the minor league facilities. There was really no reason for him to be on his way to Toronto unless it was for some sort of announcement. So once John Morosi tweeted that out, and I had been watching the plane tracker a little bit before as well because it had been a story since I believe the night before is when I first saw it on Twitter, and people had done that when he made the trek to Dunedin, and there was some truth in there.
And there was the wrong report from that LA I'm forgetting his name that he had signed. Like there was already that.
Yeah, there was already some
blog,
stuff,
like a Dodgers
so it was
blog.
So I mean. Early that morning, I had been sending out some messages trying to get responses from people to see if there was anything going on. And I mean, it was a real cone of silence, understandably so, the initial part, Jay's not wanting to say anything. But then it really went off the rails with Morosi. And to me, that was where, things got really bad on both from a journalism standpoint, because I still find that to be inexcusable. I still think there should have been more sources. That's a story you absolutely need to get right. And I'm embarrassed in journalism a lot these days at the rush to just throw stuff out there in order to get likes, in order to get attention for yourself because you want to be that guy. Exactly. And then the flip side of that is I think the Jays also did themselves a huge disservice because all they needed to do was correct. They don't need to do it to me. They don't need to do it with Keegan. They've got all kinds of people on the speed dial at Sportsnet. They could have easily given the heads up to somebody to be like, okay, you know what? Ohtani's not on that plane. We're still hoping to land him, but this plane story is nothing.
That's sat forever.
That was it's a 5-hour flight, and nobody knew for sure until Robert Herjavec got off the plane, and there were photographers because we had one there from the Toronto Star who had gone out to the airport to try and get visuals of Ohtani potentially coming off a plane, and it's the Dragon's Den guy. So I mean, it's a huge malpractice in journalism to begin with, and then I think it was irresponsible on the Jays' part, just in terms of managing their own message and expectations to not be like, okay, guys, by the way, that's not Ohtani. We would still like to sign him, but that is definitely not him.
It's the proper way to do it. You can say that without saying, hey, no, we missed the guy.
Yeah.
Say, still involved, still love the player, but that went on all day.
Yeah.
And much like Gregor, I had texts out, calls out, and complete radio silence. Like there's times where we can quickly be very aware that everyone's been told, shut the fuck up, don't talk to anybody. Yeah. And that was clearly one of those days. And I get it. That's part of the game. No problem. But nobody was getting back to anybody.
No.
And it lasted all day. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I showed Gregor this, but the inside journalism part of this, Mike, is that at MLB.com, we do most of our works just in Google Documents, which means that my editor can jump in and we can kind of
I'm in one right now.
Access like that. Everything we do is through Google Docs. When I sat down for opening day, I opened up the Google Doc I normally write my game stories in, and in that was my story, Blue Jays sign Ohtani.
Wow.
Because it got to the point where we had to have one ready. Yeah. And that doesn't mean I thought that it had happened, but like I've written obituaries for people who I still see and say hello to. Like we've got to be ready for shit in my job, I'll never tell them that I've written their obits. It's weird, but like it was to the point where we had to have that Ohtani story ready to pull the trigger and shoot it out the moment it was official.
Right.
But it wasn't, it was at that 90% range, whatever you want to call it. And
zero is it?
yeah, zero. Yeah. But it was wild for me opening that story and seeing it. Like, this is, one of the biggest moments in organization history, blah, blah, blah. And never happened.
They really did it.
That was one of the more frustrating days, hopefully, I'll ever have in this job.
Well, the reason I wanted to have this conversation with you two was because I'm just a fan, and I really do pride myself in being kind of a realist, and I don't believe this guy in his basement, this unknown person who tracked my... I don't believe anybody. I take everything with a grain of salt, and I'm not going to overreact. But the John Morosi tweet is what sucked me in. And then once you're bought in from somebody you think has... journalistic integrity and wouldn't tweet such a thing unless he had corroborated some sources and stuff. So once that happened, I start to believe it could be true, and then all the other bullshit around it starts to seem to flesh out the story. There was a former morning show host in this market who tweeted video of Ohtani landing at Pearson. Remember this? Okay.
Yeah.
Not to be named. But then, meanwhile, this is where it ties into what you guys were talking about with Rogers could basically say, we're still involved, but to our knowledge, Ohtani is not on his way to Toronto. They could say that because a station owned by the same company, the Fan 590, literally changed their schedule that day, which was a Friday, and they put Blair and Barker on for an unscheduled baseball Blue Jay talk simply to kind of take this hype machine and kind of kick it up a notch. I don't know if it helped sell tickets. I hope they did sell some tickets from this. But that Blair and Barker unscheduled surprise show was fuel on the fire, because you're thinking, oh, like surely somebody from that department would just tip them off that, like, to our knowledge, Ohtani is not actually on this plane that's being tracked. The whole thing, it is a bit like a fever dream. And then we could do a whole episode on what's going on with Ohtani today. That's a whole episode. But I was dying to know, what does an MLB.com guy and a Toronto Star guy, what is going on that day for them? Are they skeptical, or does John Morosi tweet suck them in, just like it sucked me in? Because a last point on this, I feel like I'm doing my rant now, but there were people on that Saturday when we realized, oh, he's a Dodger. I think while I was recording that TMLX 14 episode, he put on Instagram he was an LA Dodger, and we announced it like, okay, he's a Dodger.
Yeah, which was always how it was going to come out.
Well, in hindsight, yes, but
private guy on the planet,
right?
And yes, skeptical. It certainly, I followed everything like everyone else,
right?
But also, there's like a lot of the times, if me and Gregor aren't saying or tweeting something, it's not because we've just fucked off and we're at the cottage.
Yeah, you're trying to corroborate.
We don't have cottages. We're modern sports journalists.
You
not,
can, I can, okay.
But it's because we're intentionally not saying something sometimes, and through that entire day, like there was a reason I wasn't writing report stories off of this and stuff like that, but it's completely understandable for the fans to have gone crazy about that. And it all started with that, was it Hornstra? Was that LA writer who I think is a BBWA writer?
Yeah, there's also that guy.
You're hearing this from BBWAA writers, and our job is to be correct, is to bat 1,000. And a fan's job is to give a shit. And this would have been the coolest thing to ever, like, outside of the World Series, what bigger moments would there have been than Ohtani signing in Toronto? Yep. So when fans are getting this from BBWA writers who are the Hall of Fame voters, who vote on awards, when you've got that little rectangle around your neck, you're supposed to be spot on, bat 1,000.
But there were people, after it was revealed this was all a hoax, this never happened, this was a fever dream, there were a lot of people sort of like saying, like, you idiots. Like, of course Ohtani wasn't coming to Toronto. This was never going to happen. I didn't believe it for a second. I can't believe there was a moment on that Friday when you believed Ohtani was on his way to Toronto to sign with the Toronto Blue Jays. You stupid idiots. Yeah, this is sort of a consensus out there. Like, there was that. And as fans, a lot of us, and I know I did, we were like, oh, like, you kind of feel dumb. Like, it's like, oh, it's like Lucy's holding that football and Charlie Brown's going to kick it, but every time she's pulling it away. And I feel, talking to you two right now, I feel a little bit better that, Morosi is a guy that Sportsnet has on as an MLB insider. This isn't some schlub in his basement bullshitting and making things up. I don't feel so bad that I bit on that Friday. And it made a hell of a story on Saturday when Brunt came by to talk it up on TMLX 14.
All right, and you're right. There was a lot of judgment. It seemed like in the 24 hours or so. A lot
of judgment, Gregor.
And I don't understand that, because there is media outlets who are making mad dashes to Pearson to try and get the story. Keegan's talking about him writing the story. I wrote a column that afternoon as well about how Ohtani was coming to Toronto. Again, obviously, this is behind scenes journalism. It wasn't something for publication. It was something to have in my back pocket, because there's two things together. There's like the multiple reports from BBWAA members, and then there's the fact that the Blue Jays aren't returning messages. And a lot of times when they don't return messages, it's for a reason. It's not going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to give it to you for sure. We signed him. The press conference is in 2 hours. I mean, that's usually when they go dark that you think that there's something behind it. And so, of course, we're sitting there, and I was in complete shock. But there was about a 2-hour period there where I'm like, oh my good, like, this is actually happening. I can't believe that they are signing him. Now, the difference between my reaction to that and how some other people handled themselves was that I just didn't automatically start tweeting that stuff and like just throwing it out there to add even more fuel in the fire. But you had a lot of these other people who were just throwing. Anyways, the long story short, the fans have nothing to be ashamed about with that. Like, there were some. I wouldn't have done reporting on the night before, just because there's a plane leaving from LA to Toronto, to me doesn't mean anything. And maybe that night I was like rolling my eyes a little bit, being like, I can't believe that people are tracking it this much.
I'm with you. I was rolling my eyes that night as well.
Yeah. But then the following day, and if fans want to get excited and all that, that is their right to follow the planes, do whatever the heck you want. I thought that was a little bit silly, but then the next day, I mean, once you start having people whose job it is there to be right telling you that it's happening. I mean, if you got a MLB network, MLB writer who's been a columnist for a very long period of time telling you he's on the plane.
Right.
He is on that plane. If John Morosi's telling you that and that morning had been on MLB network going around doing the rounds or whatever, well, I mean, why? There's a lot of times I don't put stock into reports from Morosi. That was a morning where I did put stock into it because it wasn't just
Never
like
again.
a vague rumor. It wasn't just like, oh, the Jays are interested in this player and it's hard to prove whether or not that's right. He said this guy was physically on the plane. That is not, there's nothing indisputable about that. And you got it wrong.
And we knew there was a plane. No shot there.
Yeah, and there was already a plane. We'd established the existence of the plane.
The plane exists. It is on its way to YYZ.
Yeah.
And we now have credited, like you said,
Such a bananas week. Like going back to being at the winter meetings and we're interviewing Ross on Zoom and he's in front of a blank wall, not saying where he is. I'll never forget that week. And I always remember that day of the news shit show because it was my girlfriend's birthday that day. And she had organized us going for drinks at the bar I frequent down by the ballpark. And like some of her friends were coming. I was going to meet the friends, and I'm having a meltdown, panicking. How am I going to do this? I think I sent her to the bar with my credit card and said I'll get there eventually. And
You did. I remember you telling that story.
Yeah. And I just said, take my card, buy all the drinks on me. I don't know. And I'm trying to explain to her who Shohei Ohtani is because God bless her, she doesn't like baseball.
He's a unicorn, babe.
And just sitting home watching this unfold, it's like I haven't put steady thought into it like this in a month or two.
Right.
It's 5 times more bizarre now.
Let's write a book about it.
That I'm looking back on
Can
it.
we write a book on that
maybe
day?
I'll drop my story into the book. Here's what. No, that might piss.
The three of us can collaborate on a book about that day. They made a documentary about the 7th inning of the. I'm wearing the bat flip T-shirt.
Yeah,
right
the
now.
poster can be Ross in front of that white wall. Mystery, parts unknown.
It all seems so ridiculous now, doesn't it? Like
It
in
seems-
hindsight,
yeah,
like there's it just doesn't make any sense. And the point that I keep going back to is there is this expectation for a little while that the Jays were signing Ohtani and that they had this legitimate chance. And you look at what Ohtani ended up, he goes to the Dodgers. The Dodgers made like 4, 5, 6 significant moves after that. So the point that I still can't, when the Jays are trying to pitch Ohtani, they're like, and he asked, what comes next? That's the part where the sales pitch doesn't matter to me. Like, oh, well, we got Isaiah Kiner-Falefa coming in next week. Like, oh, meanwhile, the Dodgers are adding like 6 other All-Stars, spending like $500 more million, and the Jays are like, well, we've got about $10 million left, and we're going to divvy it up between 4 utility infielders. Come on to Toronto. Like, on what planet was that going to work? Like, this is all benefit of hindsight stuff. I realize that I get it, but like they were clearly used. And I think if there was another offseason where the Jays weren't up against like a big market like the LA Dodgers or it had been someone else, they would have had a realistic shot to sign him. They did not have a realistic shot to sign him this year. It's easy to say that now. I
You
know.
brought the fire today, Gregor. Honestly, I love this very much. This is your second visit to the basement, but it won't be your last. You were fantastic. And Keegan, Mr. Consistency, always amazing. But you two together, this is the magic formula. I think every season, every time, every early April, every year, we got to get Gregor Chisholm from the Toronto Star and Keegan Matheson from MLB.com together in the basement just to shoot the breeze about the team and other things. I love this very much.
I'm into it.
For sure.
Thank you. And anything for lasagna and beer.
I'm pretty excited for this
Your
lasagna.
company
I've been
on
talking
top
about this
of that,
lasagna for a while.
But yeah, and I was saying on the way over here, Mike, I'm in between road trips. Like, just got back from Tampa. I'm going to New York tomorrow. I don't buy groceries.
Right? No, this is going to save
This
you.
is my evening right here.
Invite me over, okay?
I was telling the story on the way in. The last time I came here, I had this lasagna, and I loved it so much. I went. I had never been to Palma's Pasta before, and like a month later, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to buy one of those lasagnas.
Look at that effective marketing.
There you go. It works.
Tell Anthony Petrucci at Palma Pasta, but they will be feeding us at TMLX 15, and that is the day before your birthday, Gregor, June 27, and I would love to see you guys there, and thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,465th show. Remember, you can read all of Gregor's words. You can read it in the Toronto Star. Subscribe. My guest tomorrow, by the way, is not Keegan, but Keenan, Ed Keenan.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of Toronto Star people dropping by. You can follow. So read Gregor in the Toronto Star, and at MLB.com, read Keegan. They're both great writers covering our baseball team here. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Toronto Mike. Much love to all who made this possible. That's Great Lakes Brewery. You guys got your beer. Palma Pasta. Don't leave without the lasagnas. They're in my freezer right now. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. That's where you go if you have old electronics, old cables. You don't throw it in the garbage. Those chemicals end up in our landfill. You go to RecycleMyElectronics.ca and find a place you can drop them off to be properly recycled. Raymond James Canada. Subscribe to the Advantaged Investor podcast. The Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team. May 12th, everybody, 2 p.m. Be there. Rod Black and more. It's going to be great. Rob Butler manages that team, by the way.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
World Series champion and FOTM. Monera Season 6 is dropping now. Yes, we are open. Ridley Funeral Home. Pillars of the Community. See you all tomorrow, and my guest is the Toronto Star's Edward Keenan.
And your smile is fine, and it's just like mine, and it won't go away. 'Cause everything is rose and gray. Well, I've kissed you in France, and I've kissed you in Spain. And I've kissed you in places I better not name. And I've seen the sun go down on Shakra.